visibility during snow and ice control operations. Together, working with snow and ice control teams, airport operators, air traffic controllers, and pilots will recognize factors that may indicate a need for surface condition assessments. To facilitate these time-critical assessments, a letter of agreement, LOA, between the airport operator and the air traffic control facility is recommended because it can help identify when runway access will be necessary to conduct a surface condition assessment or contaminant mitigation. It can also outline when known triggers will necessitate an immediate closure due to deteriorating or changing conditions. Equally important is generating and distributing surface condition reports via the Federal NOTAM System, FNS, and other communication methods to pilots and corresponding air traffic control facilities. It is crucial that both the airport operator and air traffic controller meet prior to the winter season to discuss a winter operations concept and conduct training and/or exercises well before the first snow and ice event. A key component in responding to winter events is an effective snow and ice control plan, SICP. Guidance for developing a snow and ice control plan can be found in AC 150/5200-30, Airport Field Condition Assessment and Winter Operations Safety. Keeping the plan current and detailing the responsibility for all stakeholders will ensure the plan is functional and cohesive. Proper airfield familiarization training is key to prioritizing and sequencing surfaces during snow and ice control operations, particularly for new vehicle and equipment operators. A best practice to prevent the loss of situational awareness is to ensure equipment operators have the current airport diagram, ensure appropriate radio frequencies are known and posted in each vehicle. Situational awareness that are problematic for air traffic controllers are reduce visibility from the air traffic control tower during certain weather events, transition period involving personnel/equipment team changeover, snow and ice control team entering a runway without proper clearance after runway are declared open by airport operations, snow and ice removal crews clearing a closed runway but crossing active runway without clearance, clearing taxiway connectors and using an active runway as a turnaround point without clearance from air traffic controllers. All have the potential to result in a runway incursion and possible conflict with aircraft operations. It is also important to note that other airport visual safety cues, typically visible during normal conditions, may not be visible during winter conditions. Affected items may include partial or full obscuration of airport markings, drift or windrows blocking airport signs, runway or taxiway lights covered by snow, infrastructure blocked or covered by snow. Each are normally used as geographical reference points at the airport. Best practices worth highlighting include radio communication exchange language handouts or conducting pre-season exercises on effective communications between the air traffic control tower, airport operator, lead coordinator of equipment operators, and individual equipment operators. At larger airports, airport operations may designate an individual to serve as an air traffic control tower coordinator who can help coordinate snow and ice control activities between aircraft operators, airport operations, and air traffic control, and coordinating access to the movement areas. Otherwise, a snow and ice control communication center of any size can help facilitate operations to enhance the safety of winter operations. During all snow and ice removal operations, good communication with various stakeholders is of the utmost importance. Good communication begins with a well-coordinated snow and ice control plan and the exercise thereof prior to the winter season. An LOA between the airport operator and the air traffic control facility establishes preferred methods and procedures for assessing the runway according to aircraft operations at the airport. Opportunities to identify and discuss methods to alert the airport operator to changing surface conditions. Equally important is good communications between air traffic controllers and the pilot. As appropriate, air traffic controllers request pilot braking action reports from pilots after landing and rollout to be aware of changing surface conditions, and to aid the airport operator on condition triggers that might require new or updated runway condition assessments. Pilot-reported braking actions provide critical feedback on airfield condition trends. Airport operators should monitor these reports as means to evaluate and improve conditions. Pilot-reported braking action descriptions are subjective and require the airport to verify conditions to ensure a safety hazard does not exist. Unconventional or non-standard terminology used in reports are still good indicators of potential changes in conditions. For example, surfaces described as being slick by a flight crew or stating they had a hard time making the turnoff should prompt an immediate assessment by an airport operator. These condition descriptions can be an indication of a poor or degrading condition. Pilot reporting braking action of nil will trigger an immediate closure of the affected surface until the airport operator can conduct an assessment and/or appropriate mitigation. At non-towered airports and at airports when the air traffic control tower is closed, the importance of the Common Traffic Advisory frequency cannot be overemphasized. The CTAFT is an effective tool for broadcasting in the blind for airport vehicle and equipment operators to periodically provide location-specific information, intentions of the vehicle operator, updated airport surface condition information, recently issued NOTAMs. Likewise, pilots will typically use CTAFT to broadcast their position relative to arrival and departure, report surface condition concerns when affected by contaminants. All CTAFT users must remember to look, listen, and locate. Timely and accurate condition reporting, coordination, and disseminating information by the airport operator via the Federal NOTAM System (FNS) provides confidence and credibility that surfaces at the airport are safe for aircraft operations. Field condition NOTAMs (FICON) are produced by the airport operator when contaminants are present, updated at least once during each shift or in accordance with any established known ice control plan for the airport. Although a runway condition report NOTAM may be accurate for several hours at a time, it is advisable for airport operators to update the runway condition report NOTAM more frequently, which conveys to pilots that conditions are being monitored. Frequent condition assessments are especially critical under continuous precipitation, falling temperatures, and blowing snow. The coordination and timeliness of disseminating FICON NOTAMs becomes crucial because receiving NOTAM information may take longer to reach some air traffic control facilities. For non-towered airports, the FAA recommends that NOTAMs for runway closures, snow and ice control operations, and any other lengthy maintenance activities be directly coordinated with their overlying air traffic control facility, TRACON or ARTC, when the operation will begin in less than 60 minutes. NOTAM concerns seem to be more of a problem at non-towered airports or airports where snow and ice control operations and aircraft operations are ongoing after the air traffic control tower has closed. The airport operator will utilize and disseminate the appropriate NOTAM that is sufficient and benefits their efforts for snow and ice control operations at the airport. This may involve issuing a runway closure NOTAM, an aerodrome closure NOTAM with prior permission required, a work in progress NOTAM. A best practice is to discuss the type of NOTAMs to be used to report snow and ice control operations during any pre-season stakeholder meetings used to review upcoming winter operations. The challenges of winter operations and the snow and ice removal process can be managed through advanced preparation, good communication, timely assessments, and reporting. For airport operators, the primary dissemination method for reported airport condition information is through the Federal NOTAM system. These winter operation procedures should be described in an airport snow and ice control plan, which should delineate stakeholder responsibilities. By putting all of these useful tools into practice, the airport operator and other stakeholders will be more prepared to ensure safety during snow and ice control operations at the airport, and ultimately create a safer environment for the public.
Welcome back. Unfortunately, for most of us, winter is just around the corner, and this video is a timely reminder of needing to get prepared for your winter operations program. As you expect, winter operations is an event that we often see that increases runway incursions. So planning, training, and strong communication, and obviously timely condition reporting is the key to maintaining safety on airports. Up next, we have a panel of experts that will discuss operational safety on airports during construction. Today, we are joined by Mike Rottinghaus, and Mike is a senior civil engineer in FAA's Office of Safety and Standards Airport Engineering Division. Mike has over 34 years of service with the FAA and currently serves as a subject matter expert for standards for airfield markings, airfield signage, and airport construction safety. We also have Ray German, who is currently the Eastern Service Area Team Manager, responsible for the Eastern, New England, and Southern regions under the Office of Safety and Technical Training, Runway Safety Group. Prior to Ray's role as a team manager, he was the Runway Safety Program Manager in the New England region for 11 years. Ray comes with a background in air traffic and is also the co-chair for the Airport Construction Advisory Council, working with air traffic managers as well as airport sponsors on construction projects affecting the national airspace system. Bridget Singh Ratanakal is the National Runway Safety Representative for the National Air Traffic Controllers Association. Bridget holds a commercial multi-engine pilot rating and is involved in significant runway safety efforts throughout the country. Captain Matt Gorshey is a representative of the Airline Pilots Association and the Airport Environment Group. He is a Great Lakes Region Airport Safety Coordinator and an Airport Safety Liaison at the Dane County Regional Airport in Madison, Wisconsin. Captain Gorshey is also a Chief Accident Investigator for ALPA. Captain Gorshey has 23 years of airline experience, ranging from a flight engineer on a Boeing 727 to an instructor on a Boeing 747. Matt is currently an Airbus 320 captain for Spirit Airlines. We are also joined by three representatives from Chicago O'Hare International Airport: Marco Avila, Joe Torres, and George Vickas. Marco has been employed by the City of Chicago Department of Aviation since 1997 at O'Hare. Marco was promoted to shift supervisor in 2001 and then chief operations supervisor in 2010. Marco has been actively engaged in multiple projects throughout the years, seeing the O'Hare Airport completely change with the massive O'Hare modernization program. Joe Torres has worked for the City of Chicago since 1993 at O'Hare. Joe was promoted to shift supervisor in 1997 and then assistant chief supervisor in 2002. And Joe has been part of multiple projects and assignments such as FOD chairman, union steward, airfield training, in-house graphics specialist, and construction coordinator. Finally, George Vickas is president of Asset LLC and has nearly 30 years of aviation and construction management experience. George is an FAA licensed airframe and power plant mechanic and was hired by the City of Chicago as an airport operations supervisor at O'Hare International Airport. While at O'Hare, George pioneered a new era of airfield construction and driver safety by developing safety training programs for construction workers performing work within the airport operating area. Asset currently provides airfield drivers safety training and consulting services for O'Hare International Airport for all basic, advanced drivers, and airline taxi mechanics. George also serves as a construction site manager for ongoing O'Hare modernization and the O'Hare 21 programs, where he oversees all airside construction projects for compliance with FAA regulations and procedures. With this panel, we have a unique ability to hear about operational safety on airports during construction from many different perspectives. So let's get started up front with Mike. So Mike, can you please explain what specific guidance has been provided by the FAA to enhance operational safety on airports during construction for airport operators and vehicle drivers?
Thank you, Burke. The Office of Airports establishes guidelines and standards for operational safety on airports during construction in Advisory Circular 150-5370-2. While the primary intent of this AC focuses on grant-related airfield construction, standards and guidance also represent FAA's benchmark for maintaining operational safety during construction for all airfield projects. Construction activity on the airfield, as you know, introduces various risks to normal airport utility and operation. Construction personnel will not likely have the same understanding of the airfield safety culture that regular airport operations staff have. This AC provides guidelines for identifying hazards and standards for mitigating any risk. The objective is to identify all such hazards and risk as part of the pre-design phase rather than later in design, or worse yet, during construction. This allows establishment of a risk management plan that captures appropriate mitigation measures and contingency plans. The construction safety and phasing plan CSPP is the FAA Office of Airports Risk Management Plan. The CSPP covers both strategic, optimizing the work plan and contingency planning, and tactical measures such as execution. This includes the subject of today, risk associated with vehicle and pedestrian operations. The CSPP focuses on how construction personnel, including project inspectors, move within the AOA. Specific attention is necessary on how construction personnel access the work site and how they operate within the active AOA. This includes advanced training of vehicle operators and contractor personnel to educate the importance of situational awareness and the limits of their actions and activity. The CSPP audience also extends beyond that than just the contractor. It addresses risk and coordination with other airport stakeholders that may become impacted by airfield construction activity. This includes ARF emergency response routes due to temporary changes or blocked routes, airport operations, including airfield daily inspections and mowing activities. It also includes airport security and airport tenants, such as GSC operators, FBOs, mechanics, airline caterers, etc. In order to maintain situational awareness, it is paramount that all vehicle operators within the AOA be informed and understand any temporary changes to the airfield due to construction activity. I will finish with this point. The transitions between phases represent a critical point in the project where there is increased risk to operational safety. Airfield users have a tendency to become accustomed to normal and over time temporary conditions. This creates potential for actions based on expectation bias versus actual conditions at the time of a phase change. It is important that all personnel operating within the AOA understand and keep informed of the current conditions rather than rely on what they understood a day or a week earlier.
Very good point, Mike. Certainly the transition between phases can create that inherent risk if people are not informed. So good point on that. So Mike, you have a considerable amount of experience with FAA and also as an engineer. What would be your best advice to an airport that is approaching a complex construction project?
So this is going to be a common theme in discussions later in the rest of the presentation here, but early collaboration and coordination at the time of pre-design stage provides the greatest benefits. Having such discussions later in the design phase, or even worse at the pre-construction conference, will most likely create issues during construction. This early collaboration helps with identifying a broad range of risks that allows for development of mitigation measures and contingency plans. So for large complex projects, we recommend 18 to 24 months prior to bidding that these discussions occur. This is especially true for impacts to airline scheduling, but it's also beneficial for airport operations and other stakeholders at the airport. Even for smaller, less complex projects, initiating the discussions 8 to 12 months in advance is beneficial. So the increased emphasis, another is an increased emphasis on continued and enhanced communication during design, construction, and post-construction. Providing these individual phase maps showing open and closed pavements, especially during those transition periods, has proven beneficial and has reduced risk and improved situational awareness. So those are the more common, or what I view as the best advice to approach a complex construction project. So
great, thank you, Mike. Okay, moving over to the airport folks. I'll start with Marco here. So Marco, how is construction managed on the airfield at O'Hare, and who provides the operational safety oversight during complex projects?
Good afternoon, Brooke, and everyone. At O'Hare, as a continuation of what Mike mentioned, it started off with the 7460 CSPP vetting process. 139, the airport authority is ultimately responsible for 139 purposes. But then when we get to the actual construction, the monthly and the weekly coordination, we meet up with the weekly meeting called the short-term operational phasing plan. And that's where we see what the daily and monthly effects are for the closing, where the tower, the airlines, the tenants can all come together and say, oh, this is going to work, it's not going to work. You know what's going to be closing, what's not going to be closing. Also through social media, through publications like Jepson, also ultimately training. It's going to fall into training where we have 23,000 personnel that access our AOA. And so training is a big portion of this, and especially when changes or phase changes. So, with that, I'll pass it on.
I'm sorry, was that for me, Marco? I hope.
It's for George.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having us here today. Just to expand on what Marco says is O'Hare is very unique right now, just due to the sheer amount and the volume of construction that we have going on. So unique that we just finished up a 12-year construction project, about $6.5 billion work. And just this year, we're starting the next phase of work, which is now all our taxiways and our terminals, which is going to be another 10-year project and another $8.5–9 billion worth of work. So definitely some unique situations that are going to arise during our construction activities out here. And I think one of the ways that we are very successful out here is our incredible open communication with both the airlines and air traffic. And I know there's a couple questions later on where we'll discuss those. We'll discuss those more. But we also bring on private individual construction management groups, and they oversee the construction projects out on the airfield, and a portion of that is safety. So they're definitely looking at what contractors are doing, how their employees are operating on the airfield. And then we work very closely with the Department of Aviation on addressing any issues that come up with that.
Great, thank you, George. A couple more questions I have for you is definitely O'Hare is unique for many airports relative to how you manage your driver's training program, which is different than many other airports. Can you share a little bit with the group how this is accomplished?
Sure, thank you. It is definitely unique. Like Marco said, and also the volume of drivers. O'Hare Airport has about 23,000 airfield drivers on the airfield, and we have to intermix 23,000 drivers with air traffic operations, but now also construction. We have significant construction that's going to be occurring that is going to change how our drivers access the airfield, both around the terminals, service roads, access onto the airfield. And one of the things that we do that is specific out here, or unique, I should say, to O'Hare is we aggressively go out of our way to make sure all our airfield drivers know what the significant changes are happening on the airfield. So we do have several different training classes that we provide here at O'Hare Airport. A couple of them, just for example, yearly we do a construction overview training class, and that applies to all the Department of Aviation employees. So we set up training classes in February, March, where we address with the airport, here is the construction that'll be occurring over the next year. Again, so the drivers are familiar with it. They have an idea of what's going on and what things may change. So how we've all talked about situational awareness, when they get out on the airfield, whether it's going to be in July or October or the very first snowstorm, the end of November, they'll know that the construction is also occurring. Unfortunately, construction doesn't stop, even though the winter operations are starting. So we do have that complexity of intermingling all those together. And another thing that we do out here at the airport is we have come up with something here at O'Hare called Aoa Alerts. And what this is, this is a blast graphic that we put together that gets sent out to our distribution list is, I think it's close to 1,500 people, almost 2,000 people. And whenever there's that significant change on the airfield, we create a specific AOA alert, and then we send it out. And it goes to the airlines, it goes to GSE companies, it goes to the Department of Aviation, Fire Department, all the contractors. And then from there, they can also forward it to whoever needs it. But these AOA alerts, they provide what is actually going to be happening on the airport in the next 1 week or 2 weeks, so that people are familiar with the changes out there.
That's great. And George, I'd like to ask if you could provide maybe a couple of those AOA alerts as we compile the material here for this program. We'll be sending it out to the attendees. You've really got some great examples from what we've seen on those alerts that are being produced. So another important question, and certainly the O'Hare project has had multiple impacts to aircraft rescue and firefighting response, and the need to maneuver and move firefighting routes around. So can you explain a little bit how you ensured critical access points were being maintained throughout the construction project?
Yes, thank you. Like Mike was saying earlier with the construction safety phasing plan, that is the tool that we use to get a lot of the information out to the users at the airport. So what we do is we work with our design team, and once we start getting the design established, then we start writing the construction safety phasing plan. So our construction safety phasing plan goes in line with our design documents. So they kind of go hand in hand, and we write them together. So basically what we try and do is we use our construction safety phasing plans in a manner that says, we really don't care what you're building, whether it's a new runway or whether it's a taxiway overhaul or rehabilitation. What the CSPP is providing to the airport, the users, the contractor, is how you're going to build it and what impacts you're going to have on the airfield, whether it's to air traffic, whether it's to the pilots, or whether it's to the airlines, fire department, or airfield operations when they're conducting their inspections out there. So that is one of the things that we really use out here, is the construction safety phasing plan. Whenever we have any instances where we are going to be affecting ARF routes, we work closely with the fire department, with our battalion chief that is out here, along with CDA operations. We will draft up what these routes are going to be, where they're going to go. And then we always discuss this with them prior to implementing anything. It's the same thing we do with air traffic. We've talked about this, that if we have a complex closure that's going on where we're affecting taxiway routes, what we like to do is, during the writing of the CSPP, is we will get with air traffic and ask them the question first. Hey, here's what I want to close because this is going to be great for construction. Can you live without this? And then we see what air traffic says. And I really want to say 95% of the time, we're able to accommodate air traffic's request. And we have such a great working relationship with air traffic that we know that if they come up to us and say, hey, this is really going to impact us, we really don't want you to do that, we make every effort to make sure that we do not impact them. Unfortunately, there are times that do come up where there just are no options, whether, there's just nothing you can do. But we address it with them well beforehand. So that is a lot what we do with the construction safety phasing plan portion of it, whether it's from the air traffic control side, whether it's our CDA operations. We outline everything in the CSPP, and then we brief everybody on them. The other thing that we do on our bigger complex projects is, once the CSPP is written and approved, we'll actually have a CSPP review meeting with the stakeholders. So it's project specific, that goes over what we're doing on this specific project. And again, unique to O'Hare is we're doing 4, 5, 6, 7 of these at a time, so it definitely gets complicated out there on keeping all that information straight.
Absolutely fascinating. Thanks, George. Let's move over to an air traffic perspective here and talk to Bridget a little bit. So Bridget, why is communication during construction planning important with air traffic? And can you describe how an unplanned surface closure can impact air traffic?
Yeah, certainly, Burke. Thank you for having me today. First off, I want to thank O'Hare for doing what you guys do. You do it well. I think this is a great opportunity to learn from our peer groups. We learn a great amount from one another. I look forward to looking at those documents that you guys show so that, and hopefully other airports will be able to learn from that as well. One thing I'd like to acknowledge is we know, and I acknowledge the fact that the airport operator obviously owns the airport, right? We as air traffic controllers, we're providing a service to the flying public. One of our number one goal is to provide a safe service, right? So no one goes to work wanting to ever have an event. We all have that one thing in common, right? Nobody wants to have an event. But we also have is that passion for safety as well as aviation. So the sooner air traffic is involved in planning for your construction projects, the better off you are. We have the ability to bring something to the table that a lot of people don't, which is a different perspective. And we can describe what impacts on the operation there will be, because quite frankly, there's a different cause and effect for every runway closure, every taxiway closure. And we can describe to you how we would go about moving those aircraft around and the vehicles on the airfield as well. So as for unplanned surface closures and the impacts on air traffic, honestly, so there's different subject matter experts bring different perspectives. I kind of mentioned that a little bit already, but so one may believe that there's no impact to air traffic or very little impact to air traffic. However, I'd say talk to air traffic first, as what you heard from O'Hare. Let me give you an example. So you could say there's parallel taxiways that extend to the runway. One thought process is we can close that one taxiway because, well, quite frankly, they have another one that they can use, right? Well, we're not, and in other words, that's no impact or very little impact to air traffic. But what that individual might not be thinking is, I may now have to hold aircraft off on the ramp because now I'm backing up, or I need to clear the runway. So it's going to take more time. In other words, the runway occupancy time may increase because I can no longer exit a runway at a given location. So if a runway occupancy time increases, that could mean traffic management initiatives need to be, and those being put into place. In other words, if you put traffic management initiatives, what you're looking for is increased spacing on final to allow for that increased runway occupancy time. So what was initially, they've got parallel taxiways, there's no impact, actually ends up being an impact. So again, there's a cause and effect to every construction project, and we can help fill in those gaps and really make no assumptions. So honestly, collaboration takes work, it takes time, it takes effort. Air traffic control works the airport day in and day out. We're there. We can see and help predict things that many cannot. So working together helps really eliminate confusion. It helps prevent unnecessary delays and makes an already safe environment much safer.
Great, thank you, Bridget. I want to move over to Ray German. And Ray, the Airport Construction Advisory Council is really doing some great work. Can you tell us a little bit about your role with the council? Talk a little bit about the charter and some of the significant initiatives the council has implemented to ensure safety during construction.
Sure thing, Bert. Good to be here. Good to see everyone. I'm the co-chair, one of the co-chairs for the Airport Construction Advisory Council, also known as the ACAC. One of the things we do is we provide assistance. We're managers working with managers. We provide assistance to the air traffic managers of the airport, of the air traffic facilities, as well as the airport authorities on upcoming construction projects. Mike actually touched on something earlier that is key. Getting involved sooner than later. That's one of our roles. Whenever we hear of any kind of construction that's going to be taking place, we reach out to not only to the air traffic manager, but sometimes even to the airport authority to get some information and kind of go from there. One of the initiatives that we're working on currently is automating what we call construction notice diagrams, or CNDs. Currently, we're doing those all manually. That's a morning process where we pull all the NOTAMs for whatever airports we currently have construction going on at. And those get sent to our folks in mapping, where they take those and they put them onto an airport diagram and show the closures related to any kind of construction projects. As I mentioned, we're looking at automating that. We've started reaching out to a lot of the facilities, a lot of the airports out there in the NAS, to get them trained and get them onto the construction notice diagrams that are automated. that will provide real-time information to not only the pilot community, but to also the airport drivers on the airfield. What that's going to do, again, is show you an airport diagram. It's going to give you the NOTAM number. It's going to give you the verbiage for that NOTAM. And it's also going to give you the start and end date and show you exactly, it's going to give you a visual reference to where all those closures are taking place. And again, that's real time versus currently where we're doing it manually. It's done the next day. So there's a little bit of a lag there, but we're excited about the automation. We're excited about continuing to roll that out and working with the airports in order to get that done.
Great, thank you, Ray. Let's move over to the pilot perspective here and talk a little bit to Captain Matt Gorshi. So Captain, from an operational safety perspective, what specific items are most important to pilots when operating on airports during construction?
So as Ray and Bridget pointed out, and the theme is getting information, timely information out to pilots. And that means at a minimum about 28 to 56 days as the national flight data cycle to get information put in. Airport operators, and I think every airport operator that's on the call today, you are the foundation of the success of any construction project. When airport operators get their information out early and specifically ask Jeppesen to produce a construction notice, when we have that information at our hands and everything's driven through our iPads or our devices, once we have that information, that is the most critical thing that we can have. So before we even show up to the airport or when we're briefing in the flight deck prior to pushback or a half an hour, 250 miles from that airport, we have that information at our fingertips. If that doesn't start early with that limitations of Jeppesen with the 28 and 56 day cycle, we may see a lengthy delay of getting that information. The good part is if that information is lacking, the NOTAM system with this, there are a few issues we have that we're trying to overcome, but it's still a good system and all the information is in there. Trying to sift the most pertinent information out for construction on a major airport, it can be a challenge if there's 80, 90 NOTAMs during a given time, but it is there. The other major pieces from air traffic control is to make sure the ATIS is broadcasting pertinent information, letting us know what exactly is closed. Houston, for a number of years, has gone over the top, and they actually have a construction ATIS frequency that you can tune that has all the construction information updated. I don't know exactly how often they update it, but it's one of the only airports that I know that use such a system. Also with ATC, ensuring that we read back our clearances properly. Pilots love to hear what they expect to hear and not what was actually said. Pilots, when we operate at a certain airport, especially we've been doing it a long time, we think we know the program, we expect to do X, Y, and Z, but when construction pops up, the normal route might not be available. So for us to make sure clear communications, hear back, read back is correct, and anything is corrected in real time. The other thing, and it needs to be said, is clear signage, clear markings, lights that are in the appropriate position, that are bright, that are clear. Unlit signs for construction, while are great, especially at night, and they're off to the side. Most of our lights on aircraft are pointed straight ahead. We don't do very well with angular light distribution. So a sign, we might not catch, because while we're taxiing the aircraft, we have a lot of things going on with briefings, starting engines, running checklists. So at some points, there's only one pilot looking out the window because the other pilot's busy inside. And finally, again, trying to communicate as much as you can, work with ATC, work with the FAA, but also on major airports like Atlanta has Delta Airlines base there. Chicago has United, American, and Spirit. Make sure you're reaching out to the chief pilots or management pilots at those airports. Talk with dispatchers. If you have information that you need or want sent out to pilot groups that can't be sent out through Jeppesen or another means, especially pictorials, it's a great source to give to chief pilots, because then they can push that through internal methods of communication and get it to our flight decks.
Those are some great points and some suggestions and some reminders for airport operators. So thank you for that. Bridget, going back to you here. What specific information is most vital for air traffic controllers to know when construction is occurring on airports?
So I'm going to echo a little bit of what Matt just said, but closures cause non-standard configurations for air traffic controllers in the tower. So that means the same taxiways that I've been saying for the last 15 years is now changing, right? So habits are hard to break. These non-standard configurations actually could mean additional trainings necessary for the air traffic controllers before it takes place. So training could mean that we need to actually run those non-standard configurations through simulations prior to the controllers working that configuration with live aircraft, right? So that takes time. The more we coordinate and we communicate on those proposed projects, and the further in advance that we do, the more that we can plan in case we do need that type of training to take place. I'd also recommend under promise and over deliver. So contractor delays not only impact you guys, but they also impact the ones providing a service. So quite frankly, we may need to open up additional air traffic control positions in a tower cab based off of frequency congestion, or honestly to provide additional oversight in the cab. This could trickle up to the approach as well. So they may need to open additional sectors. In other words, we may just need more air traffic controllers on duty. So if a project is getting delayed, let us know as soon as possible, because many people don't realize that air traffic controller schedules actually come out a month in advance. So really work with your facilities to make sure that they understand what's going on. And what it all boils down to is working on a plan together and communicating.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bridget. I want to go back to Captain Gorshi. So Matt, what tools or best practices do pilots utilize that help make operating on an airport with active construction safer?
The best thing that we do, the best thing we have in any flight deck are 2 well-trained pilots. When we have accurate information, when we have timely information that we have the ability to review ahead of time, it makes our life really, really easy. We can formulate a plan. We know what to expect. As we talked about before, we have so many things that go on during a taxi with briefings. Most operators will taxi single engine to conserve fuel. We have checklists to run. So if we know we're going to run into a complex situation during a taxi, we can start both engines at the gate. We can plan our briefings for low workload time, so we have both pilots heads up. Once we have the ability to know what's coming at us, we have the ability to react to it and manage our workload so it's on a even keel all the way out to the runway. So we have the most situational awareness, 2 people heads up, and looking for, should something unexpected come up, we have the most human resources to be looking outside the flight deck and react to them accordingly.
Very good. Very good. Bridget, what about the tools that air traffic has as far as tools and best practices on implementing during construction?
So I want to talk about memory aids for a minute. So air traffic controllers, we utilize memory aids to help remember closures and restrictions on the surface. So, and we use these on a daily basis. We utilize them to help remember, hey, if an aircraft's been cleared to land, if it's been cleared to take off, if we're giving hold short instructions or land and hold short operations. In other words, utilizing memory aids is a very common practice in the workforce. So there are 44 airports out in the National Airspace System that have surface surveillance, which means that we have a display in front of us that allows us to mark on that display if a runway is closed, if it's open, basically that status of the runway, as well as we can put yellow boxes for restricted areas. These are great memory joggers, but there's a lot of airports out there that don't have that. So what they're really doing in the cab is you might have like basically a circle that's red and it'll say in which runway is closed. I'm out of DFW, so I'll say 17 right closed. So they'll have these little memory joggers or placards that basically have certain statuses. Okay. So I keep emphasizing communication with the tower cab because quite frankly, they may not have that additional surface surveillance that's available to them to have this audible alert if something goes wrong. And they're really relying on rudimentary like placards or strips to help remind them of certain elements. So more you can communicate, the better off you are. No two airports are alike. If you have been to one airport, you've been to one airport. So bottom line, each air traffic control facility will have procedures for memory aids or additional tools to help air traffic controllers remember when a surface is open or closed. But giving that additional heads up 10, 15 minutes before you make a closure to that cab is really critical.
Okay, great. Thank you. And talking a little bit more on the tools here, Ray, I want to go back and touch on the airport construction notices again, including where they can be found and how exactly are those generated.
So as I mentioned, the construction notice diagrams are actually an airport diagram. And when we pull the NOTAMs for that particular airport, we'll go on and our mapping folks will X out if there's a runway that's closed. They'll X out the runway, and again, they'll put all that information down in the legend of the construction notice diagram. Where they can be found, they can be found right now in a couple places. If you go to our Runway Safety website, there's a link on there that will take you to the construction notice diagrams that we currently have on, that we're doing manually. As I said, some of those have already been automated, and if they've been automated, they are not going to show up on that. If you actually go to FAA NOTAMs, the NOTAM search, when you pump in a particular airport, whether it's DFW or LaGuardia or any of them, if they have a construction notice diagram, that's going to show up as the very first search when that comes out. So at the top, you'll see a little yellow box up in the left-hand corner with black lines running through it. And you'll see over on the right, it'll say construction graphic. If you click on that, that will bring up the construction notice diagram for that particular airport. Whether it was done manually or whether it was done automated, it will show up in there. As I mentioned, any airport that's on NOTA Manager, they have that ability. They're going, or I should say, they're going to have that ability once they're trained to go in. Once they input all the NOTAMs, they can click a button, basically hitting it to send it to the automation. And again, it'll be real time and it'll be instantaneous. Once that NOTAM, if that NOTAM continues on, if they update that NOTAM, it'll get updated automatically. If that NOTAM drops off, it'll take care of that again as well. So just a couple of locations of where they can be found.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Ray. So George, I want to go back to you on talk a little bit about what training procedures, local publications have you seen implemented by airports to increase situational awareness and operational safety during construction?
Yeah, thank you, Burke. I think with those, one of the, I really believe going back to this, one of the critical one is the construction safety phasing plan. For an airport, especially from the operations side, that really puts together what's going to happen with a specific construction project on the airfield, and then you could address a lot of the issues that come up. What we have found is when we are actually writing the construction safety phasing plan, we're identifying a lot of the issues that are going to arise during construction before we even put a shovel in the ground. And that's just an incredible help, because we really then from that, we start determining ways that we could train people on what is going to happen out on the airfield. As far as, for other airports and things like that, it's a think out of the box. You really got to think a little bit differently, because there isn't that much out there as far as getting that notification out, with the exception of the Jepsons and Aerobonds and stuff like that. And that's what we've done here at O'Hare. We have worked closely with the Department of Aviation, with operations, air traffic, the airlines, and what can we do to get the information out? It's we look at it from, we'd rather get this information out there than sit around and wonder, what should we do, or is this appropriate? Can we get it out? We're getting the information out there however we can to let people know. And what Captain Gorshi was saying, I really love that. I really want to try and find a way to work with the pilots more. and again, I'm going to use O'Hare just because we have such incredible complex construction coming up next year. We are relocating our legacy taxiways, out at O'Hare. Access to the gates are going to be different. Gates are going to be closed. Transitions are going to be closed. But the thing about it is they're going to change every 20 to 30 days. So it's not like we're making a change and the change will be there for 6 months, 8 months. Like Matt was saying, you'll come in here 1 week and then 2 weeks later, you're going to come back and your taxi routes are going to be different. So I really love that, trying to brainstorm. And that's another great word I like, is brainstorm. Sit down with your operations folks and how else can we get this information out to people? I'm definitely a firm believer of, we got to get the information out to people. The more people, they want to know. They want to know what's happening at the airport, whether it's from the air traffic side, the airport operations side, our snow removal. Our people want to know what's happening, and we're making every effort we can. And the other thing is, don't forget about the contractor to all the airports that are out there. We talk about our advanced drivers and air traffic and pilots. How about the contractors that are actually doing the work out there? These are people that are not trained to work at an airport every single day. You have new contractors that are coming out onto your airport that have never worked at an airport before. So one of the things that we implement is we do construction specific training. So we'll actually take our contractors and go through the entire project with them with the construction safety phasing plan, so their workers know what are happening out there. Another thing we do is we do specific flagger training. We're going to have so many reroutes and deviations of our service roads and contractor haul routes. Our contractors are going to have to cross active taxiways in places that they've never crossed before. So places that a pilot has never seen a vehicle or construction vehicle, next year, unfortunately, they're going to start seeing them. So we're going to be putting flaggers there, but we are training our flaggers for what they need to be aware of. So again, it's just, I think it's an outreach and brainstorm. Think out of the box on what else we could do to get the information to the people that need it.
Great. The question, so, obviously O'Hare is an airport that has considerable resources, financial. From your experience, from what you've seen, what areas could smaller airports focus in on that are not as large as O'Hare, don't have as many resources to be impactful and effective with regards to safety during construction?
I would say is at any airport, right? It's going to start with a design team, right? So normally any airport will be hiring a construction, engineering, architectural firm to start putting their drawings together, because you have to get your local permits and all that, and you can't do that without approved stamped drawings. And for smaller airports, maybe that's something that they could reach out with, is utilize your design teams. They've already given you a cost to design this project. I would think an added, almost insignificant cost would be, how would you be able to work with us to help us provide some of the graphics that we need? I think there are a lot of airport operators, operation supervisors out there that would be able to create a lot of these documents on their own. Maybe they just never seen them before. And like you said, Burke, we'll definitely provide them to you. And, everybody feel free to copy them. I mean, that's what they're out there for. They're there to get the correct information out so we could keep everybody safe. And maybe airports just don't know what else is out there. And we could create that library that makes things easy, accessible to other airports, all airports around the country, on what they could use to get critical information out there. The other thing I would say is, don't be ultra worried about stepping on people's toes. That is when we start looking at safety and what we try and tell our contractors. Actually, what we do tell our contractors is, think about your mistake out on a city street. On a city street, you're affecting 1, 2, or 3, or 4 people's lives. You make that mistake here at the airport, now it's 100 or 200 or 300 or 400 people's lives. And when we kind of put it like that, it really brings it home. And so I'm not ultra worried about stepping on people's toes because we didn't get this information to the right, the right way. If I could get it to a pilot, if I could get it to a driver, that's where we want to get it because they're the only ones that could correct a potential mistake out there.
Great suggestions. Thanks, George. Ray've got a question from one of the attendees. I'm not sure if you can answer here, but what is the FAA's timeline to implement closure restriction NOTAM diagram automation to all Part 139 airports?
So as I mentioned, we're starting to start that process and going out to those airports to get them trained. That waterfall is probably going to continue on through at least the end of the year. I know some of the bigger airports, the O'Hare's, the LAXs of the world, those airports have already been trained. So as we continue to roll them out, more and more of those airports will become available and become automated. As I said, before when we were doing these manually, we had about 90 airports that we were tracking. Once this goes automated and we're able to get those airports trained and online, that number goes right through the roof. I mean, you're looking at over 1,000 airports that we can be targeting and getting those construction notice diagrams out there. So I hope that answers the question.
Great, thank you. I want to go back to Captain Gorshi. Can you provide some feedback about some challenges, impacts, or concerns experienced by pilots during construction on airports?
Well, as great as the NOTAM system is, one of its downfalls is there are so many. We did a flight, there was an example flight from Chicago to LA when both were under major construction and they had 200 plus NOTAMs. For us to sift and digest through that is a difficult thing, especially if we don't have a pictorial diagram of construction to find out in all those NOTAMs what exactly is important to us, what's going to impact us, and what's not. Ray German and Dave Seward have done some awesome work with implementing the construction notice diagrams. The only piece that's missing is getting that information into the flight decks of both domestic, international, foreign carriers. It's updated, it's real time, it's a great graphic. It takes 60 NOTAMs that are in text form and put them in one picture so we can look at it. But right now, we don't have that information directly in our flight decks. If you take the 30,000 pilots that are flying today, probably less than 0.5% are even aware that they exist, where to find them. That has to be driven through companies to push it automatically through our flight plans, through dispatch. So it's right there at our fingertips. Because that's not a Jeppesen publication. That's a government publication, which is awesome. But if we can get that real-time information, and just like George was saying, upcoming, they're going to have taxiway name changes. They're going to have quick changes, 10-day, 20-day. Jeppesen can't handle that. So if we can get that tool into our flight decks, that would be, incredibly awesome. Another point, and it applies to airports that don't have strict runway use programs. Atlanta, for the most part, if you're going a certain direction on a certain departure, you know what runway you're going to get long before you get to the gate. And 364 days out of the year, you're going to get a specific runway. LAX and Chicago don't have those strict use programs. It gives ATC a lot of flexibility on moving aircraft. But then for us, if we expect, let's say for Chicago, departing off the south parallel, where there's a lot of construction, well, at the gate, we have planned to do going off the south runway. We've briefed it. We put it in our navigation system, and we push off the gate thinking that's our plan. However, if we start taxiing and then we get a runway change, now our workload goes up dramatically because it's something we did not expect. As I said before, we love a plan. And when we can brief a plan and have time to adopt to that plan, it's great. But when we get runway changes on the roll, it makes our life very difficult because now our workload, we have to go down and get a pilot changing the navigation system. We have to rebrief. We have to figure out our new taxi route. How does construction affect that? So when the plan does get changed, especially significantly, that's a significant challenge in flight decks.
Good points. So Bridget, from an air traffic perspective, can you provide feedback about challenges, impacts, or concerns controllers experience during construction?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing is communicate as much as possible and as frequently as possible. You don't want to wait till a safety risk management panel or an SRM panel to communicate. You don't want to wait till the bid goes out or basically right before issuing a NOTAM. I mentioned before a little bit with regards to communicating with the tower just before opening and closing pavement. So the people that are in your annual, quarterly, monthly, or weekly meetings are likely not the air traffic controllers that are actually keying up the mic. So with that being in mind, I want to talk about midnight operations for a second. The people who answer the phone during the day are likely not the same people that are going to be working at night. So as an example, say you call at 4 o'clock in the afternoon to remind them of a 1 a.m. runway closure. The people who are going to be working that 1 a.m. closure, they don't actually come in till about 10 o'clock at night. So they're relying on the individuals during that afternoon shift to give them that breakdown when they come in. So the people on the afternoon shift are actually leaving when they give that, after they give that brief out to the controllers coming in the evening shift, they're done for the day. They're going home, all of them. And the people coming in on that evening shift are just starting their shift, right? So we're all human, we all make mistakes, but just picking up that phone 10, 15 minutes before a closure, whether it's on a midnight shift or during the day, just to make sure, hey, we're all on the same page, as well as, quite frankly, if there's any changes to that plan that you had earlier, make sure you pick up the phone and call. The goal is we have a safe operation. Another portion of that goal is to make sure we have minimum impact to that operation. So safety works best when we're all working together. And there's, quite frankly, there's a lot more positive outcomes to bringing us all together early on than there is waiting.
Okay, great. Mike Rottinghouse, we've got a question from one of the attendees here. And I know that this is something that's been asked by many airports. Does anyone have suggestions for new runway integration into an existing configuration, especially when it's likely that all runway names will change?
So I'm assuming by runway names, it means runway designations, and there'll be an extensive planning effort that precedes the actual change. So there needs to be coordination with the various lines of businesses within FAA. As far as external, I would advise outreach well in advance that this is happening, so that the pilots, the airline communities, they understand what's occurring. So, you know, those are external, or those are outside of the actual construction going on. But just informing everyone that this is happening well in advance before actually making the change is basically the best practice. So.
Mike, can you talk a little bit about the engineering brief? So if we're talking about taxiway nomenclature changes, how you would approach that incrementally?
Kind of the same way as you want to, the airport wants to provide outreach information to the users, and then update the charts accordingly so that pilots are seeing the most current information. We don't want to do this in a vacuum. So even before the construction project occurs, everyone should be aware what's happening. So it's that advanced collaboration so that the construction projects is just about the carrying out the work to change everything. But being informed that that's part of the CSPP strategic or strategy portion, that everyone is aware that this change is happening, so that, smaller airports, it might be the airport manager or operator sending the notice out to users based aircraft at the airport that, hey, this is changing. So it's more about publicizing that in advance. So.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mike. Okay, I think we're running up here against our time here. So does any of the panel members have any last thoughts, anything that we haven't covered here that the attendees would find informative?
One final thing I will say is any airport that has a ALPA carrier serving that airport, we have a airport safety liaison. It's basically a pilot volunteer that normally lives local that will attend RSATs. That is a resource for any airport operator if you need or want a pilot's perspective. I'm sure my email is on here. Any airport operator needs their ASL for their airport, we'll be more than happy to provide it if you don't know it already.
Matt, that is outstanding. Thank you. Any of the FAA attendees, anything air traffic? Bridget, anything last minute?
I was just going to add to on a little bit more with Mike hit this pretty good with regards to like if the runway identifier is changing in particular. I've seen this across the National Airspace System a couple of times within the last couple of years. But in other words, we're changing one runway from 1-2 to 1-3. What planning is really key there because we want to make sure the charts match what is on the pavement, right? As well as we want to make sure that the approach clearances are the same as what is on the pavement. So we don't want to be giving an ILS approach to 1-3 when on the pavement as 1-2. So all of that timing is really a very sought after, nice, clean dance that is made between multiple lines of multiple departments within the agency all at the same time so that we can have as little bit of confusion as possible. So if I clear an aircraft to land on runway 1-2, and that is what you see in front of you. Or if I clear an aircraft for an approach to runway 1-2, that is what you're going to see when you break out. So I just wanted to add that little piece in there. Make sure you're coordinating as early on and with as many people as you possibly can to make sure all that timing is taken in consideration.
Thank you, Bridget. Any last thoughts from the folks at O'Hare?
Yeah,
I just want,
go ahead, Marco. No, go ahead, Marco.
couple of things. I wanted to just add a little bit to the runway identifier changes. I'll give you a real life example of what we did a few years ago. We had two parallel runways, 14 left, 14 right, and they both ultimately got decommissioned. When 14 left went away, we were left with 14 right. And we didn't want to just name it 14 because we didn't want to leave the impression that there was still a parallel to it for those pilots that were used to coming into those runways. And we didn't want to change that designation to a 1333 because it would be too close to midways runways. So we went the opposite way. We named it 1533. We ended up calling it. Yes. And so because we changed it to a 15 versus 14 and versus 13, similar to midway, that helped us in that runway designation. The other point I wanted to touch on was closing the loop on what Bridget and Captain Gorshi brought up. Our stop meetings, our short-term operation phasing plans are key for the weekly planning of what's going to be closing, what's going to be available for the pilots, because the airlines, the pilots, everybody has an idea of what's going to be available to them at any given time. Aside from that, we have our daily construction sheets that our sections pick up on a daily basis. And ultimately, there are changes even beyond that. And that's where the loop completely closes, where our section, almost on an hourly basis at times, is on the phone with Power, confirming this is what's available to you, we're planning on closing later on. Because there are multiple changes or multiple projects going on, FAA TechOps may need a runway for a certain period of time overnight, and might affect operations overnight. You may need to be opening up runways in the middle of the night. So this is a daily, hourly almost coordination, and it really starts with stop meetings, give everybody an impression of what we're going to be doing for the next week, 2 weeks. Our daily construction sheets that gives you the picture for the next 18 hours, and then our even hourly briefings with Tower. The Tower themselves puts out an extension of the stop meeting maps that one of our contractors creates to ATC personnel on a daily basis. And it's part of the daily briefing. They put out those planned closures in the draft description of what's going to be available to them. And that's done every morning.
Okay, thank you, Marco. Okay, so we're right up against our time here. I really want to extend a big thank you for all the panelists today. As we heard, safety during construction requires strong collaboration and constant communication with stakeholders. As we have embarked on a massive infrastructure program with the bipartisan infrastructure law, it is imperative that we remain focused on operational safety on airports. So at this time, I want to turn things back over to Kelvin Ampofo, the branch manager of airport operations from the Office of Airports, to introduce our next session and panelists.
Well, thank you so much, Burke, and certainly to you and your panel. Thank you for a phenomenal afternoon session. Up next, we have a panel of subject matter experts that are going to discuss surface safety hot topics. The panel will cover a wide range of topics to include tug, tow, and taxi operations, runway safety area operations, and how surface operations can impact aircraft operations, the importance of relationship building to promote safety, and vehicle operations around aircraft maneuvering areas. This panel, first off, we have Mark Williams. Mark is an FAA Aviation Safety Inspector with the Air Carrier Maintenance Branch, also known as AFS 330. We have Matt McNamara. Matt is the manager of the Technical Operations, Quality Control, and Assurance team. Their team mission is to reduce operational risk in technical operations. We have visitors all the way from the Garden State of New Jersey, Newark Liberty International Airport, represented today by Greg Darden. This panel is also rejoined by Giovanni DiParo and Tom Mize from our trends presentation this morning. As a reminder, Gio is the Runway Safety Group Manager, and Tom is a staff certification specialist and runway safety liaison in the Airport Operations Branch at FAA headquarters. Well, to this distinguished panel, thank you for joining us this afternoon. Let's get started. I'd like to start off with Tom. Tom, there has been a lot of talk about vehicle pedestrian deviations. We know them as VPDs. But are there other surface events airport operators should be aware of?
Yeah, Calvin, great question. So earlier today during the trends presentation, we defined the different types of surface events as operational incidents, OIs, pilot deviations, PDs, VPDs, like you just mentioned, which are vehicle pedestrian deviations, and then there's others. So there's a lot of discussion today focused about VPDs, but I really want to take a moment and remind everyone listening that they need to be aware of PDs and what potentially occurred, because this may provide the airport operator with information to help improve their surface operations. So PDs may actually help the operator in identifying areas where signage and marking or geometry, throwing back to what Steve Debin mentioned earlier today, need to be improved. You know, it's also important to know that there's been a number of close calls attributed to PDs, even though a surface operator or vehicle driver could have taken a proactive response during this event. Now, in these events, communication and situational awareness, a theme of today, should be evaluated by surface operators and improvements to existing programs explored. So how do airport operators get this information? Now, at facilities with air traffic control towers, the air traffic manager can share the information, have that conversation. And at non-towered facilities, it's really important to observe your surface operations and set up forums to have discussions similar to what we're doing today with your local tenants about surface safety. Now, let me pivot and look at this question that you asked me just a little bit different about other surface events as they relate to VPDs. So we have said that a VPD is a vehicle pedestrian deviation, but I'm curious if some in our audience would be surprised to know that an aircraft that's not intended for flight, or an aircraft being taxied or towed by a non-pilot, that operator of the aircraft needs vehicle training to access the movement areas and safety areas of the airport. So this means if an aircraft, again, not intended for flight, as I just described, enters the movement area unauthorized, a VPD will be captured as a surface event and most likely investigated to improve surface safety.
Very impressive, Tom. Very impressive. Now, Mark, from the flight standards perspective, as we know, flight standards is responsible for investigating a VPD by a certificated person other than a pilot, like a mechanic, for an example, while taxiing an aircraft on airport movement areas. Can you explain how flight standards investigates these events and promotes the training needed by these operators?
Thank you, Kelvin, for letting the Aircraft Maintenance Division from Flight Standards be present in this and provide this information. The FAA's Flight Standards Service provides guidance and explains how it investigates these events and promotes the training needed by these operators in FAA Order 8900.1, Volume 7, Chapter 2, Section 1. Flight Standards recognizes that the Office of Airports is responsible for investigations of all vehicle or pedestrian deviations and often asks flight standard offices to assist in the investigation, aid in the completion of FAA forms, and validate information. These requests come to Flight Standards when the Air Traffic Organization's Regional Operations Center forwards completed FAA Forms 8020.24 to the appropriate Flight Standards District Office, the Certificate Management Office, or an International Field Office. This form notifies these Flight Standards offices of vehicle and/or pedestrian deviations. It's important to understand that the regulatory definition of a person is broad. A person can be an individual that is certificated, such as a pilot or a mechanic, but it also includes certificated entities such as air carriers and repair stations. When a Flight Standards office becomes aware of and is asked to assist with a vehicle and/or pedestrian deviation investigation concerning a certificated person it oversees, it will gather the necessary data to make a safety management assessment and determine what action is necessary to fix the underlying problems that cause the deviation. In addition to vehicle and pedestrian investigations, Flight Standards plans and schedules routine safety assurance activities of air carriers that validate air carriers and repair stations. Processes are well documented and contained procedures and controls and interfaces and oversight that ensures safe and effective operations. Surveillance of air carrier and repair station processes include oversight of their management, their flight operations, their dispatch processes, maintenance and technical operations, and ground and station operations. All of these can be involved in some manner with a vehicle or pedestrian deviation or an unsafe activity. Whether it's an investigation or planned surveillance, Flight Standards considers the following as it makes its safety assessment. Is life or property in danger? And if so, why? The FAA understands that when humans are involved, mistakes can happen. When they do, Flight Standards considers why did the humans err or perform poorly? Were procedures followed? And if so, are they effective? If they were not, is it because they are confusing or unknown? Knowing mistakes are inevitable, air carriers and repair station manuals must establish safety controls that prevent these inadvertent errors that could endanger the life or property of another. Verify personnel involved or observe followed procedures and safety controls are effective, and do the records show that each individual involved with the aircraft move or taxi was competent to perform their assigned duties and tasks. The term competence is subjective unless there is a defined standard within a person's manual or document, and a record exists that establishes successful evaluation of the individual against the standard. Competence requires some level of testing and demonstration. Flight Standards' opinion of training programs that only provide qualification training without evaluating competence contain an element of risk. Training programs are key to safe practices. When evaluating training programs, flight standards aviation safety inspectors determine how well the certificated training program interfaces with the training program of the airport where the vehicle pedestrian deviation occurred. Vehicle training records show the individual involved or observed has the training required to perform the tasks in which they were engaged, and they conduct and flight standards aviation safety inspectors conduct interviews or surveillance observations that verify persons involved or observed were fully informed about procedures and techniques and new equipment in use. The whole purpose of our investigations, of our surveillance, is to identify knowledge gaps or shortcomings in policies and procedures. We document our findings. If the investigation finds that a certificated person other than a pilot is not responsible for the VPD incident, then the investigating flight standards office will send a letter explaining the findings of investigation to the above, to the air traffic division as it completes FAA Form 8020-19. If safety issues and or regulatory non-compliance are identified, we follow our processes in Volume 14, Chapter 1, Section 2 to determine the appropriate FAA compliance enforcement action that's necessary. When investigating a VPD, Flight Standards Office must closely examine the certificate holder's training program to determine how well it interfaces with the training program of the airport. ASIs are directed to AC 150 5210.20 in order to facilitate as necessary any airport operator actions needed to restore compliance and prevent the problem's reoccurrence. We debrief the operator on any findings that we may have, and then we document these findings in our safety assurance system. Thanks again for letting me have this opportunity.
Oh, thank you, Mark. Great information. Tom, can you tell us how are tug tow and taxi operations captured in airport guidance, and what is expected from airport operators?
Absolutely, Kelvin and Mark, thanks for that answer and leading into some of the things I said and giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit about our guidance. So Mark, you actually mentioned AC 150 5210-20. So that's entitled Ground Vehicle Operations, which includes taxiing and towing of aircraft on the airport. Now, this advisory circular issued by the Office of Airports provides guidance to airport operators to develop training programs for the safe ground vehicle operations, personnel taxi and towing of aircraft, and pedestrian control on the movement areas and safety areas of the airport. Now, additionally, we have also issued Cert Alert 20-01, and that's entitled, if you're looking for it, Required Training for Vehicle Responsibility. Required training for vehicle operators prior to accessing in the movement area was also issued. Now, our guidance captures responsibilities for airport operators to ensure training is provided to authorized personnel conducting these activities. Now, following up with what Mark said, and a little bit about what I previously mentioned. So our guidance identifies that when an aircraft is not intended for flight, anyone, except for pilots, taxiing or towing an aircraft need vehicle training to access the movement area and safety areas on the airport. So when I refer to vehicles on the airport, these operations are also captured. Now, although Flight Standards investigates, and Mark sort of detailed that in his response, these events involving mechanic taxiing the aircraft, the airport operator is ultimately responsible for establishing procedures and policies for vehicle access and those operations on the movement area for authorized personnel. So additionally, the airport operator is also accountable for training and the actions of vehicle operators approved to operate on the airport. Now, Mark indicated that the Office of Airports works collaboratively with Flight Standards to ensure procedures, policies, and training have been established for the taxi, tow, and tug operations. So these procedures and policies and training can look a little bit different depending on how they're implemented. Some of the examples are, the airport can train all persons accessing the movement area and safety areas. They're providing the training. Secondly, the airport operator may actually provide the employer, the organization, or a person, let's just say, for example, that person is privately owns an aircraft, with procedures and policies to train their personnel. This is commonly referred to in the industry as train the trainer, as implemented. And then the airport operator can also incorporate, depending on the airport size, the vehicle and pedestrian operations training and enforcement into their tenant lease agreements. So for all you listening today that want to develop or review your ground vehicle operations program, RAC contains recommended operating procedures, sample training programs, sample training manuals, and also samples of letters of agreement as applicable. Now, the FAA website also contains tools which will aid you in establishing programs and improving safety for your airport surface operators. Now, I'll end with, not all of the information addressed in our guidance may be applicable to the airport, but we do recommend, the FAA, that each airport operator evaluate your vehicle training program depending on size, complexity, and operation, ensuring you are accounting for aircraft being taxied under their own power by non-pilots or being towed with no intention for flight into your drivers and surface safety programs.
Outstanding, Tom. And certainly all of this talk about airports, certainly you worked at an airport before, but we couldn't put you on the spot for that. So we're going to our friends at Newark Liberty International Airport. Greg Darden, thanks so much for being here. Greg, can you talk to us briefly about your driver's training program and how has Newark implemented procedures that Tom mentioned to capture tug, tow, and taxi operators at your airport?
Well, thank you, Kelvin, and the rest of the FAA and the panelists for having me on this panel. I truly appreciate it. It's an honor. So first of all, we have 3 levels of drivers. We have driver 1 or DR1, which we allow drivers to operate within the non-movement area only. That includes ramps, service roads, terminal areas, hangar areas, and even cargo areas. These drivers do not have communication with the air traffic control tower, and they must always remain in the non-movement areas and clear of the movement areas. We also have DR2, which is our highest level of driver access. This level allows drivers to operate within the movement area. These areas include runways, taxiways, runway safety areas, but please keep in mind that all DR2 drivers must have two-way communication with the air traffic control tower at all times. All DR2 drivers must gain clearance from air traffic control to access runways, helipads, and safety areas. And as part of the letter of agreement that we have with the air traffic control tower, this level of access is granted to only our Port Authority personnel and FAA Tech Ops personnel. And finally, DR3 or Driver 3 allows high-speed tug operators and drivers and aircraft mechanics to access the movement area under radio clearance and progressive instructions from the FAA Air Traffic Control Tower. At this level, the tug operator is only allowed in the movement area when towing an aircraft. Once that aircraft is parked, that tug operator will remain in the non-movement area, and he cannot go back into the movement area unless he has an aircraft under tow. Aircraft mechanics are allowed to taxi aircraft in the movement area, and they have to have constant communication with tower or ground control as well to do maintenance runs and even high-powered runs. Now, it's important to note that Newark Liberty International Airport has approximately 9,000 or more drivers on the airfield, including all those 3 sections. And since we have that limited amount of personnel to train all those drivers, we've elected to allow the train-to-trainer process for both DR2, DR1, and DR3. Now with DR3, it's strictly a train-to-trainer. We train all the instructors for their company, and they go back and train their employees. For DR1 and DR2, we have both Port Authority personnel who train employees. And for DR2, we have Port Authority who train our guys and the Port Authority police who train all the police operators. The airport operator will train only a handful of individuals. And if, God forbid, if any of those individuals violate policy, then we have to send them back for retraining or completely, restrict that training from those individuals.
Very interesting, Greg. So let's elaborate on that just a little bit. So let's just say if there was if there was a VPD or a vehicle pedestrian deviation or other issue with a vehicle in the movement area, what steps does your airport take in addressing the incident?
Well, unfortunately, we have faced a few of those at this airport. but we're doing constant things to improve our DR2 program as well as our DR3 program, and to restrict or even mitigate personnel from violating or entering a runway or runway safety area, or even onto a movement area. So if a VPD occurs, the first thing we do is we confiscate the CETA badge. We escort the individual or the violator off the airfield, and we issue what we call at our airport a breach of rules. It's basically a ticket or a violation of the rules. With that, we take a statement from the violator, and depending on the severity of the incident, we'll send that violator back to the movement area training, suspend their driving privileges, or permanently revoke their CETA badge. I know it sounds harsh, but it's all about safety, and we want to make sure we maintain that safety. We also use such technology as our airport surface detection equipment, also known as the ASDX, in conjunction with a web-based surface management system. That system is very specific to one particular contractor, but there's many of them out there, so you can do the research and find out different types. So this technology provides real-time surface movement and allows us to monitor all vehicles and aircraft in the airfield. When a VPD occurs, we review the history of the violators and their movements, and we also listen to the air traffic control frequencies, whether it was ground or tower control. This helps us to determine how the events unfolded and what the root causes were of the VPD. And lastly, we conduct an after action review with our management, our certification manager, our aviation director, and we even invite representatives from our sister airports like John Fitzgerald Kennedy Airport, LaGuardia Airport, and Teterboro Airport. And we typically do this within a 24-hour period. We found that once we invite all these airports together, sometimes there's common causes or common issues that we have at other airports. And if they have an idea to help us resolve it, that's great. And sometimes we can bounce ideas off each other to resolve these similar issues.
Outstanding, outstanding. Are any actions the airport is taking that go above and beyond to ensure compliance of tug and tow operators?
So as part of our tug operators movement area program, we always provide our operators and our instructors with Ils critical area maps, airfield maps with hotspots, and even zipper marked areas. And we even include the FAA runway status lights video as part of the training. When there's an area of high concern or frequent concern or issues that occur in a specific area, we've created these things called Ops Alerts. So Ops Alerts are internal alerts that we use amongst our airport to get out information or areas of high concern. Similar to FAA certification alerts, but just like I said, internal for this airport. We handle the distribution on the Newark community website. We also send out emails to the instructors with the attachment, and we'll even physically hand out flyers and say, hey, listen, put this in your break room. Also to attach this during the training classes when the instructors do training. We also make it a point to give the instructors an opportunity to visit newly constructed areas, run-up pads, parking areas, hotspots. All of these things are done prior to them actually becoming instructors. And if they need the opportunity to frequently visit an area that they can't visit on their own, we'll also provide that opportunity. And lastly, we currently incorporate a 25-question test for all our tug operators and aircraft mechanics prior to the renewal of their CETA badges.
Outstanding, outstanding. Let's transition just a little bit. We're talking about runways, and it's imperative that we also understand with runways comes the safety environment of the runway, or the runway safety area, RSA. So in addition, with the runway safety areas, at most airports, we will have, where there's a tower, we will have an LOA, or a letter of agreement. And so, Tom, can you talk to us about why is defining runway safety area procedures important, and how can controlled and uncontrolled facilities capture these procedures?
You bet, boss. And I'm starting to think you're picking on me just a little bit, but no, real quick. So before we get going, let me define what a runway safety is for the audience. So a runway safety area, or an RSA, is defined as an area surrounding the runway consisting of a prepared surface suitable for reducing risk or damage to aircraft in the event of an undershoot, overshoot excursion from a runway. Now, RSAs will be cleared and graded with no potential hazardous ruts, humps, or surface variations. They're also drained to prevent water accumulation, and they're capable under dry conditions of supporting snow removal, ARF equipment, and I like this, the occasional passage of aircraft without causing major damage. Now, critically also, RSAs are free of objects, and these actually exclude objects that reside in the RSA because of their function. And you may be familiar with this, we call these fixed by function. Now, examples of fixed by functions objects are approach lighting systems, runway and identifier lights, taxiway lighting, and signage. So with that being said, now the RSA would normally be clear of people and equipment during aircraft landing and departing operations. So we're not introducing potential hazards into the runway safety area. I want to be clear, the airport operator is responsible for protecting the RSA. So when activities need to take place in the RSA, they should occur either between aircraft operations or when the runway is closed via NOTAM. Now, the FAA, we do acknowledge that depending on the facility configuration, operations, there may be situations or circumstances where airport operations require vehicle or equipment to be in the RSA for a limited amount of time during aircraft operations. An example of this could be unscheduled nav aid maintenance or repair. Now, for airports allowing RSA access during aircraft operations, this will be the exception to normal procedure, requiring defined procedures with all parties authorized to enter the movement area and safety areas before any RSA activity occurs. Now, this actually applies to both towered and non-towered facilities, and depending on size, complexity, and operation at the airport, these procedures may be captured a little bit differently. So for our certificated airports, our Part 139s with or without towers, I want you all to say it with me. So 14, Code of Federal Regulations, CFR, Part 139, 329, requires those airports to do what? Document procedures in the airport certification manual, and that's to ensure safe and orderly access to operations in the movement area and safety areas by pedestrian, ground vehicles, and this also includes establishing letters of agreement as applicable at your facility. 139s must also ensure that persons are all trained on procedures established. Now, at non-certificated airports, with or without towers, certain provisions from applicable federal grant agreements may apply, requiring the following. And Anthony, I see your question, and this kind of speaks to what you're asking. Those airports need to adopt and enforce adequate rules, regulations, or ordinances as necessary to ensure the safety and efficiency of aircraft operations and to protect the airport. You may also need to define rules covering vehicular traffic and access to certain areas, and this includes the RSAs, and also establish letters of agreement if applicable. So no matter if you're certificated, non-certificated, controlled or uncontrolled, establishing procedures as to not introduce potential hazards will protect the runway safety area.
Tom, you're just like a teacher, man. This is amazing. Great stuff. Gio, like you to chime in. What is the FAA doing to enhance the awareness of runway safety area procedures and agreements between all parties accessing these areas?
Thanks, Kelvin. So the Runway Safety Group, which I lead, is really fortunate enough to participate in something called the Runway Safety Action Team Meeting. So it's a yearly required meeting between all stakeholders at that airport, talks about surface safety. So one emphasis item that we have done, especially for this past year, is really working with those airport operators. And I think, Tom, you brought it up earlier. The airport operator is the lone authority that can open and close any surface on that airport. So air traffic really works that surface based on what that airport operator says is open and closed. One thing we also have to acknowledge is really no two airports are created equal. I mean, I look at a San Diego single runway operation, busiest air carrier single runway operation in the world. Then we look at DFW, 7 runways, lots of flexibility, is closing one of the runways, you know, to make sure you got that sterile RSA going to be as much of an impact at a DFW or a San Diego. So we developed these runway safety area letters of agreement. And that LOA essentially really outlines the procedures and is signatory from our friends at Technical Operations, which manages and fixes all those nav aids that we talked about earlier, those PAPIs, the runway and identifier lights. We have the airport operator that may go out there and have to do at times, you know, maintenance on drainage ditches and so on and so forth. So what that does is once you have all the stakeholders outlining how you're going to access that RSA, what is going to be allowed in that RSA. The key component also is that radio communication, maintaining that positive communication with who's out there. So if air traffic needs to move you out of there for, you know, depending on what that airport allows. So those key things really are outlined. One more thing I do want to add is that it is imperative that those LOAs really are standalone. What we've seen with certain airports is that we have movement area LOAs, and that part of that RSA is captured with that. We really want that training piece that once the technical operations folks train their technicians, once those controllers are trained on the provisions of that LOA, and including that airport operator, that it's a standalone RSA LOA, so everyone's on the same page, and that mitigates that risk.
Awesome, Gio. Thank you. And so while we're hearing about all of this, Newark, what steps, procedures are in place for a person to access a safety area at your airport?
Well, we have a letter of agreement with our air traffic control tower that allows all DR2 operators, and like I said before, that's Port Authority operations as well as the FAA Tech Ops, to access the taxiway system without receiving a progressive instruction. Please keep in mind, all movement area drivers must monitor local and ground control as stated before while operating on the taxiway system. When it comes to runway safety areas, runways, and helipads, all movement area drivers must receive clearance from the air traffic control tower to gain access. Access to the runway safety area is only allowed under specific approved conditions. No equipment or vehicles are allowed within the runway safety area while that surface is open, unless there's a runway inspection being performed or foreign object and debris or FOD is being retrieved. And the other caveat is if the FAA has to do an emergency repair, but that's typically done if they, have to go out on foot to repair a particular device. In addition, our driver trainer program also restricts drivers from crossing or accessing a runway without permission from the airport duty manager. So DR2 personnel must contact the airport duty manager's office to obtain an airfield briefing, and that airport duty manager will provide pertinent information such as runway closures, runway configurations, construction closures and areas, and even some taxiway closures, weather conditions, and any ILS critical areas being protected if the field is under instrument flight rules, or if the field is, if there's pending IFR weather conditions. And all of this is written down or taken down from the operator or the driver via airfield briefing card. So I'd like to show that card if I'm able to share my screen here.
And explain to us, what is this? You're showing us a briefing card? While
Yes,
you're pulling that up, how does that work?
It's an airfield briefing card, and it basically provides the driver with the ability to write down the information that's been given by the airport duty manager. We also do spot audits with this card to ensure that they are always carrying this card. So if you're driving out and about on the movement area and you've received this card, that means you've gotten a briefing. So you're basically taking down all the information that the airport duty manager has presented to you. So any closures, any runway configuration, whether the field is IFR or VFR, what ILS critical areas to avoid, construction, and who you've been briefed by, and what's your mission for the day. So on the second page, or on the back page, because it's a 8.5 by 5.5 card. So you flip the back page over and you'll see that it has the runway incursion prevention indicators. So the surface painted signs, the runway hold position signs, the enhanced centerline marking, the surface painted runway hold position markings, the elevated runway guard lights, and pavement runway guard lights. And I believe I covered all 6. Oh, and the hold position marking. So 6 indicators, 6 things to look out for, as well as monitoring all the proper frequencies.
Outstanding. Thanks for sharing that, Greg. And
No
you mentioned ILS. So just instrument landing system for those that may not be familiar. So the ILS critical areas. So Matt, let's talk about how surface operations can impact aircraft operations. Can you tell us about the importance of protecting ILS critical areas and any messaging your office wants to communicate to help educate and support airport operators when these systems are present on their airfields?
Thanks, Kelvin. You know, as everyone knows, well, probably on this call, the ILS provides landing guidance. And a lot of times that landing guidance is in use regardless of weather. A lot of folks even use it in good weather. The terrain that's in front of both the localizer and glide slopes, that terrain plays a really important role in the proper development and transmission of the ILS signal. Really anything that's in that critical area can disrupt the ILS signal. In some cases, it can even shut down the equipment. And we're not just talking about vehicles or mowers here. If dirt is mounted there, say during construction, or snow buildup, excess vegetation, even erosion fences can have an impact on that ILS and the ILS signals. So that's really why it's important to keep those areas protected. As far as education initiatives, you know, in the spring, we have one that's going to be coming up from technical operations. It's going to be an initiative to really share the importance of protecting that critical area during mowing. We're going to have some posters that go out, or we'll be sending them out to our maintenance folks to coordinate with the airport operators and go and talk to their airport operators about their mowing processes. The posters are really nice. They even have a little QR code that when folks, you know, activate that QR code, they'll see a little video about exactly why protecting that critical area is important. So we're really looking forward to that. Probably the most important advice I could give about an ILS critical area, if you have any questions about it, talk to your tech ops maintainers, the SSC managers, or the folks that are out there maintaining that equipment. They're very familiar with all the rules about that equipment and can really help you understand what's happening out there.
Thanks so much, Matt. Matt said something. I think it's a theme. We've heard it throughout the day, talking, communication. Let's go into relationship building just for a little bit here. So Greg at Newark, can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with FAA Tech Ops and the coordination that your airport does to ensure your ILS critical areas are protected?
That's a very good question. So I think we have a great relationship with our tech ops, as well as other FAA personnel and other personnel here at the airport. The Port Authority, the FAA, Air Traffic Control Tower management, as well as tech ops management, we hold a weekly meeting along with some participants from the airlines. And in that meeting, we talk about different things such as construction and routine maintenance and upcoming events, and even incidents that have occurred the week prior. We typically do this once a week. When we found that this helps build a tremendous relationship and helps us work together and come to an agreement, you know, on what we're going to do for that week. So we'll pretty much plan our runway closures, our maintenance, and all that within a week time frame. Also within our airport certification manual, there's a letter of agreement with tech ops that ensures communication from them before entering an ILS critical area to do work. That also rings true for us. If when I say us, I mean Port Authority operations. If we're going to operate in a movement area, we have to either stay clear of an ILS critical area or request clearance from the air traffic control tower, which 90% of the time we're not going to get that clearance. We have provided driver training to all the FAA tech ops and personnel. As part of our training, we have signs posted up along our service roads that actually not interfere, but cross ILS critical areas. So with that being said, I'd like to share another couple of slides here that show the ILS critical areas that we want our personnel to avoid. So if the airfield is IFR or under instrument flight rules, and we're landing on runway 4 right, we have signs posted up along one of our service roads that restrict personnel from going through. So the first sign is posted up at one of our guard posts, and as they enter the guard post, they'll see a flashing sign to their left to notify them whether the field or whether a certain section of the field is being protected. So in this instance, you can clearly see that 22 left is being protected. And on the next slide, if 4 right is being protected, that sign before would show 4 right illuminated, but we also have 2 other signs on the service road that completely protect the ILS critical area. So that area has 2 signs and 2 lights on the north end and the south end of that service road that restrict anyone from driving through. And as you can see on the sign, it says, please do not proceed, contact Port Authority operations for clearance. And again, we won't grant clearance. We can't grant clearance, and the FAA will unlikely grant clearance.
Outstanding. Thank you for sharing.
No problem.
So Matt, obviously Tech Ops operates at both controlled fields, uncontrolled fields. Can you talk to us about some of the challenges of operating at a variety of controlled and uncontrolled facilities? How important is communication, and how can airports help?
Yeah, really, when we talk about the challenges of that wide variety of facilities, it's probably the largest challenge is just maintaining familiarity with each of those facilities and these special requirements that are required for those facilities, ensuring that folks are understanding the LOAs and making sure that those LOAs are accurate and current, and that they're clear and understood. Just to keep saying, as you had mentioned earlier, that the constant theme is, build that relationship, communicate between Tech Ops and the airport operators. It's just so important to help make sure everybody understands what's going on. We all have the same goal, really, safe operations. And it's important that we understand the needs and expectations of each side, whether we're talking about driving, whether we're talking about maintaining, whether we're talking about projects. There's just no substitute for good communication in a relationship.
Outstanding. Let's talk a little bit we're talking about runway safety. Obviously, we're talking about vehicles. So let's talk about vehicles operating in and crossing pavement used for aircraft maneuvering, right? So Tom, you thought I was picking on you. No, I'm going back to Greg again. So Greg, at Newark, do you have vehicle roadways that cross paved areas used for aircraft?
Yes, we do. And we also make sure that we teach that and present it in all our driver training classes. So our service road, there's several locations where it actually crosses active taxiways. Those service roads are zipper marked. And these locations are presented in all our non-movement area driver training classes, as well as reinforced in our DR2 movement area and DR3 tug and tow and mechanics classes. All these locations have signs, they're marked, they have both the elevated sign and the surface painted sign, and including a stop bar at the location where they need to stop prior to crossing that intersection. And we stress that all drivers pay extremely close attention in these areas while they're traveling through these locations. The other thing I want to mention is one of the things I routinely talk to the DR1 drivers about, because they're the ones who are constantly crossing these areas, probably a lot more so than other operators, is to make sure that you crack windows, listen, for any traffic as it's coming across, because sometimes, especially at night, you're hearing before you see them. So those are the few things that we're doing at those locations, and that's pretty much how we handle it.
Now, is there something you want to share specifically as it relates to how you manage and coordinate vehicle crossings with the vehicle operators and air traffic control in certain areas?
Yeah, so with that being said, like I said before, we had those surface painted stop signs, but unfortunately, there was a location out on the airfield that's been a bit of a hot topic, and I want to share that now. That location is down at our helipad, our only helipad at the airport. So if you see up on the screen and you see where my mouse is, that's the helipad. And that's on a Group 3 taxiway, which leads to our only fixed-based operator and to a couple of hangars on the north side of our airfield. And right at this location, where I'm circling, is where the vehicles are supposed to stop, look both ways, and continue on, along the service road. So on the right-hand side is a more close-up photo of where this location is at. So you can see, just to give you a little bit of a background, this area is a little bit confusing for some personnel, especially for personnel who are not familiar with the north end of the field in the hangar area. And we constantly, or in the past, we've had a couple of issues with vehicles going down that taxiway thinking it's a roadway. So we've tried to increase driver awareness by reteaching this in our course. And even when we do DR1 classes, we physically take personnel out to this non-movement area and show them the helipad and tell them about the dangers of going down that taxiway. So after a few brainstorming with our ops certification team and our management and even our sign shop, we came up with a plan to repaint these surfaces and put up a couple of signs. We also spoke to the FAA from our regional inspections department or inspections services to make sure they were on board with our decisions and what we decided to implement. So this is what we came up with. Going in the eastbound direction along the service road here on the left side of the screen, we made sure we reinforced these stop signs that are elevated as well as surface painted signs. And instead of having a regular paint on the surface painted signs, we decided to put down a laminate that enhances and stays longer. And only thing you have to do is come through and clean it up. If you look a little bit in the distance and you see this yellow sign, that's another sign that we put up that prevents or is supposed to prevent anyone from making that left turn onto the taxiway as you're crossing that service road. So we put up a lot of things, including these battle signs, which we got approved from the FAA to put, and the stop sign, and even the stop sign on the other side of the service road as you're going westbound. So that's a closer look at the paddle signs, notifying people to do not enter and to remain clear of the helipad safety area, and a close-up look of that sign I spoke about before. So again, we're focusing on safe operations at this location. And as you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, you have a truck that's stopped as an aircraft is taxiing through. And hopefully we did all the proper mitigation to keep this from happening again.
Outstanding, Greg. So Gio, based upon what we've seen, based upon what we heard, we're going to go back to the C word, communication. And how important is communication and the use of proper phraseology between the control tower and surface operators?
Well, Calvin, I think it always comes down to one thing, clear, concise communication. And those things are imperative to really mitigate surface safety risk. So we look at some events that come in, and like I said, every runway safety event that happens in the National Airspace System comes to the Office of Runway Safety. And when you start looking at root causes, is that the communication, there's assumptions, and that's a key thing, a lot of assumptions, and individuals who believe that their instructions allow them to cross a runway. So I'm going to use one of Tom's as repeat after me. Unless you've been issued a runway crossing instruction, do not cross that runway. It must be part of your clearance. And it's such a simple thing. So when someone says, well, proceed as requested, did you get cross runway 22 right as part of your clearance? No, do not cross that runway. Stop. It is imperative. No clearance in the National Airspace System across a runway is ever implied. It must be issued. And I think that is key when you kind of look at the communication that air traffic and drivers and pilots is. You must understand exactly what's being said to you. If you don't have that courage to ask that question and just stop, it's lives that you're taking at risk. And I think you can't say that enough, how important that is. So, honestly, if I can get through to anyone, unless you've gotten a runway crossing clearance, do not cross a runway. It's quite simple, but I just think we just have to acknowledge that.
But the controller said, "Go ahead." No, I'm just
right. Right. Yeah, Calvin, that's it. Runway Safety puts out a lot of different products. We have From the Flight Deck, which is really kind of talks about hotspots and everything else. And we are working on a video that's called "Roger's Not a Clearance." And and it's really a lot about phraseology. And it's the correct phraseology for surface safety. And we're really excited about this. This is something we're working on, but I can't stress enough how incorrect phraseology from both sides of the mic, drivers, controllers, that, just kind of like, go ahead. Like I said, that's a great example. Go ahead. No one in there, nowhere there was the word crossed the runway as part of it. So it's a good point.
Excellent. Are you seeing any recent events pointing to areas of awareness or improvement for both parties?
Yeah, I'll give you an event. We won't talk about the facility, but technical operations was escorting some individuals. They're between parallel runways. There are taxiway ends, and there's a service road. And the way that they described we're going to leave the area led the controller to believe that they were going to just vacate the taxiway, go onto the service road, and take that around the perimeter of the runway, essentially back onto the movement area. Well, that's not what they were going to do. Because of the size of the vehicle, they couldn't go on that. They had to cross the runway. Once again, what happens? Assumptions on both parts. They get to the approach end of the runway. There's a heavy 767 about to land, and they cross the runway, escorting, a bunch of vehicles. Well, the safety logic, activates. We send the 767 around, essentially we mitigate the risk with the safety logic. But once again, nowhere there was the word cross the runway. It was Roger, proceed as requested.
Interesting. Greg, I'm going to jump back to you again, hopefully one last time. We're talking about communication. Can you talk to us about this training at Newark, and specifically as it relates to communication? How do you ensure that vehicle drivers know and understand the proper phraseology?
Very good question. So during our initial driver training, we provide them with materials such as the books, the non-movement area books, and it explains all of that, all the phraseology, including the phonetic alphabet, and it's laid out simple and plain so that they can read and understand it. But prior to them being cleared or being, checked out, they have to take a written test. They also have to take a map test, and they have to do a check ride with a qualified instructor. Now, during that check ride, phraseology is key, right? So we ask them, such things as, or we listen for things when they're doing communications with ground control, such as, are they going to read back all their instructions? Are they concise and clear on their speaking? Are they, are they garbled on the transmissions? All of those type of things. And if they don't do it properly, we reevaluate and maybe take them out for a little while and bring them back another day to try again. But it's important, especially to read back, and especially saying off, at least at our airport, if you vacate a runway, saying off, those kinds of things, and not, crossing a runway without clearance, without proper clearance. So that's what we do to make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to do as far as communication.
Outstanding. We have just a couple minutes left in our segment. So each of our panelists, you're going to get a 1 minute closing. So get your thoughts together. You're going to get 1 minute to give closing remarks before we move to the next panel. I see one question, and it's going to go to you, Greg. It relates to, it looks like your ILS lights that you showed in your presentation. Who operates those red lights to turn them on and off? So
the Port Authority actually owns and operates those lights, and our maintenance department maintains them. The one thing I will say is, unfortunately, they're physical lights. We I don't know why, but we haven't done anything remotely about them. But now that's my mission, to try to get them done remotely, because when you think about it, And if the field goes IFR and we get the notification from tower right away that the field is IFR, we basically have to send out one or two or three individuals to turn off those lights. One will take care of the south end and one will take care of the north end, because we don't want to penetrate the Ils critical area while it's IFR. So it takes a little bit of time. And my fear has always been, since I've been here, that someone is going to go through that Ils critical area when the lights are off. So it's something we're working on. But yes, Port Authority installed them, we own them, we turn them on, and our maintenance department maintains them.
Outstanding. Thanks for that. To our guests, you can utilize your Q&A. If you're on YouTube, you can put your question in the chat and we'll facilitate it. We've got just a couple minutes left, but we've got enough time for each of our panelists to give us a 1 minute closing remark, statement, anything that you want to share with everybody that's watching today. We're going to start with Mark. 1 minute, please.
Well, Kelvin, thanks again. And it's been an honor to be here. I do want to emphasize that the interface between the airport's training programs and these air carrier training programs is key to success as far as safety goes. Without good, strong communication between those two programs, then there's gaps in that and potential for errors to be made. I would like to bring to your attention, Kelvin, that there is a question from YouTube that was submitted up there around 121 and one above that in the chat, if you wanted to address those. I don't know.
All right.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Let's go to Matt. 1 minute, please.
Thanks again, Calvin. I won't even need a minute. All I want to just remind everybody of is, build a relationship for your airport operators, build a relationship with your tech ops counterparts. The dividends that pays can be huge for both sides. And, I'll just leave it at that.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Let's go to Gio.
I'm going to build on what Matt said, build that relationship with tech ops and air traffic. It's those two entities that you're really working with on a daily basis, that working together, you mitigate that surface safety risk. For driver training, I can't stress enough, bring those drivers and let them meet the people that are on the other side of the mic. So those controllers, really, when you go into an RSAT, at times I'll do facility tours where we're coming out of, not being able to sit there and interact with them. Once you kind of get to meet them, you realize that they're people just like you. And, I think those relationship building pieces really can sit there and make a difference at an airport.
Thank you, Gio. Let's go to Greg.
I would agree that the relationships that you build with different personnel, tech ops and FAA tower controllers is important, and it's a key to a successful program. And also to conduct spot audits and checks on your drivers to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and make sure that the instructors are doing what they're supposed to be doing. So that's what we routinely do, and hopefully that leads to a successful program, not just for us, but for everyone.
Outstanding. Thanks, Greg. And last and certainly not least, Tom.
Well, I got to go on the theme of the day, relationship building, right? One thing that wasn't mentioned is build a relationship with the Office of Airports to assist you. And then lastly, I'll say, build that relationship with each other, because that is critical. Everyone needs to understand you are not on an island. And if you're facing challenges, there's another facility that's facing challenges too. And one of the reasons why we're having these discussions, we're providing the forum, and I see the questions coming in. Can you share your programs? What are you doing about this? We all have the same questions. You all have the same questions. I used to have those questions. So please build those relationships with each other, build the relationship with FAA, all those lines of business. I'm going to say it, we're the FAA and we're here to help.
Thanks so much, Tom. Certainly to all of our guests that are watching, and certainly to this panel, thank you so much for today. What a great time we've had with this panel. And I'll just quickly echo, I think, what everybody's saying as it relates to communication. Also to our airports, make sure you reach out to your certification inspector, not just because it's time to do the annual inspection, but with questions or any updates, please utilize that resource so that we can all have our airports in a great and safe environment. Now, again, to our panelists, I just want to say thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. We're going to move into our next segment, and I now have the pleasure of introducing Mr. Phil Davenport, who is moderating and presenting during our next presentation on notice to air missions modernization, and he will introduce us to the presenters. Phil Davenport is an Office of Airports Headquarters Staff Airport Certification Safety Inspector with 14 years of experience with the FAA. He has been the subject matter expert on airport NOTAMs for the past 3 years as part of the NOTAM Modernization Initiative. Phil is an Air Force veteran who has over 40 years of airport and airfield operations experience accumulated over his military and civil service. So with that, Phil, take us away.
Greetings. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Phil.
Okay, I don't have camera. I have my camera on, but I don't have view. So I'll proceed. Perhaps we get that fixed as we proceed. This is the last presentation for today on FAA NOTAM modernization. This involves the FAA continuous effort to modernize the NOTAM system in order to improve delivery of safety critical information to the aviation airport stakeholders across the NAS. Lots of the information that we've discussed today up to this point will likely find its way to or through the NOTAM system at one point in time. Presenting with me today will be John Warner from U.S. NOTAM Governance, who for the last 3 years have been working as subject matter expert for the FAA current NOTAM policy, as well as the drafting of the future International Civil Aviation NOTAM policy. His other prior experience includes working as an air traffic control specialist and operations supervisor with the Flight Service Program. He has 21 years of experience with NOTAMs and NOTAM policy and was a trainer for the initial takeoff and landing performance assessment rollout for the NOTAM release. We also have Greg Uhas, who has 14 years of flight service experience, with 11 of those years experience with Lockheed Martin Leidos as a specialist, operations supervisor, and quality assurance analyst. Additionally, he worked in the FAA Flight Service Safety and Operations Policy Group for the last 3 years and currently serving as a NOTAM subject matter expert as part of the NOTAM Modernization Initiative. And the last person with us today is Matt Trimble, National Aeronautical Information Service Representative for the National Air Traffic Control Association. Matt has over 10 years experience as an air traffic controller in both the en route, center, and terminal air traffic control TRACON environments. So that is the panel for today. We have a full agenda of information to cover, talking about the modernization effort, some airport-related statistics. We will cover various factors of the NOTAM system, from guidance to policy to NOTAM tools. We will talk about some of the recent takeoff and landing performance assessment enhancement, and then conclude with some FICON and work in progress NOTAMs, and hopefully a couple takeaways we can give the group before we leave at the end of this presentation. So John, with that, we ask you to go ahead and kick it off for us, please. Okay, John, we're not getting any audio from you.
Thanks. A lot of buttons working here, so sorry about that. Yeah, good afternoon. Quick background on who NOTAM governance is and how it influences your airport. We are the FAA's authoritative source for U.S. NOTAM policy. Our team is responsible for the maintenance, update, and publication of the FAA Order 7930.2, Notice to Air Missions, which establishes NOTAM policy for the national airspace NOTAM operations. We do this by partnering with the Office of Airports, who have regulatory requirements to ensure airport condition reporting in accordance with the Federal Aviation Regulations 139, Part 139, and advocate on behalf of the airport operators for NOTAM requirements. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the FAA Advisory Circular AC 150-5200-28, NOTAMs for airport operators. The AC describes how to properly format and disseminate NOTAMs in accordance with FAA Order 7930.2. So the FAA is modernizing the NOTAM system to improve the delivery of safety critical information to aviation stakeholders. The aviation's goal is to provide pilots, flight crews, airport operators, and other users of the national airspace with NOTAMs that are relevant, timely, and accurate. The long-term process includes much planning following a developmental process, which requires safety reviews, testing, and collaboration across multiple lines of businesses. Therefore, the NOTAM modernization is likely to be a prolonged effort, but it will remain as our collective driving force as we work to ensure we get right for our NOTAM customers. And our NOTAM modernization efforts address the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018 and the Pilot's Bill of Rights. It will ensure U.S. NOTAMs are compliant with standards and recommended practices set by ICAO. The effort will also involve mitigating the number of NOTAMs within the NOTAM system. The NOTAM Modernization Initiative will continue to drive updates to NOTAM policy. Recent updates to the 7930.2 and the AC 150-5200-28 were directly related to NOTAM modernization.
So Greg, can you share some of the statistics that we've been using as we go prolong into this NOTAM modernization initiative?
Sure thing, Phil. This slide provides data on the proliferation of NOTAMs for airports since 2012. You can see a pretty big uptick there. What has changed in that time frame? Well, that was the development of the NOTAM manager system or application for airports to process their own NOTAMs without needing to contact flight service to issue NOTAMs. If you look at this chart here, the second column from the left shows the number of outstanding permanent NOTAMs that are in the system. You can see there's over 350 perm NOTAMs that are currently older than 1 year. You can see from this chart that the current number of NOTAM manager airports has been on the rise over the years. We're up to 1,690 out of 5,000 public use airports, or around 5,000. And we'll continue to encourage migration to NOTAM manager, where right now there's about 70 to 80% NOTAMs that are issued and available in digital format. This graph shows the percentage of digital NOTAMs versus non-digital NOTAMs. NOTAM Manager, eNOTAM 2, TALPA scenarios, and some of the obstruction NOTAM scenarios are all digital. But if you're aware of an airport not using NOTAM Manager, please encourage them to reach out to us so we can get them connected. We'll talk a little bit more about digital NOTAMs here in a minute. So airport operations throughout the U.S. Issued over 600,000 NOTAMs last year, which is more than any other source. This is to be expected, however, as most NOTAMs are designed for airports specifically. These would be your runway, taxiway, apron, or FICON NOTAMs. Airports that are able to submit NOTAMs via NOTAM Manager will increase the amount of digital NOTAMs. And this will help the efforts to gradually or graphically represent NOTAM information and provide plain language format of the NOTAM to users. In addition, if NOTAM issuers submit their perm NOTAM data for publishing into the appropriate chart or publication, then that will contribute to the NOTAM reduction efforts.
So
Okay,
the
John,
FAA,
I'm sorry, go ahead, John. Just
Yeah.
going to ask you to kind of talk to us about NOTAM expectation and perhaps some of the best practices that you'd like to cover.
Yeah, the FAA's goal is to reduce the number of NOTAMs a pilot needs to review before flight. We can accomplish this by increasing confidence in airport-related aeronautical information by reducing reliance on the NOTAM system for communicating permanent aeronautical information changes as the airport to pilots and other stakeholders. We also want to increase confidence in airport-related aeronautical information by reducing reliance on NOTAM system for communicating permanent aeronautical information changes to the pilots and operators. So along with regulatory requirements, one should ask themselves, what makes an optimal NOTAM? That answer should be a NOTAM that is relevant, timely, and accurate. So the along the lines of questioning oneself, what are some NOTAM's best practices? When originating a NOTAM, certain questions should come to mind. Does this action require a NOTAM and or meet NOTAM criteria according to previously cited references? Is the NOTAM being issued with enough time to be distributed to end users? And are proper correct contractions being used for the NOTAM format according to examples in the advisory circular? And does the NOTAM clearly define the effective attributes, location, and conditions? So earlier in the conversation, we cited the 7930.2 is the FAA's publication which establishes national policy for the national airspace NOTAM operations. The latest update to the order was completed in December of 2021. Additionally, along with the updates to the 7930.2 Office of Airports AC 150-5200-28G was updated and was published in May of 2022, with each being harmonized with similar requirements. Each version included extensive new information on the PERM NOTAM process and TELPA enhancements for runway FICON NOTAMs. Wildlife and obstacle data submission information also. And NOTAM changes are expecting to last NOTAM changes expecting to last less than 3 months are considered and should be considered temporary, and NOTAM distribution is appropriate until condition returns to published normal and NOTAM cancellation. If the expectation for the condition and NOTAM to surpass a duration of 90 days or extend into a prolonged period, publication process should be triggered until the condition resumes to normal. And the order and AC now states that prior to issuance of a PERM NOTAM, one must demonstrate that the publication process has been initiated. Once the information is published, the existing PERM NOTAM can be canceled. The NOTAM issuer will have to cancel the NOTAM as it is not done automatically. And NOTAM issuers can start the publication process by accessing an FAA web page that provides all possible links to the different types of published data, including airport data changes, NAVA changes, and ATC changes. And at the bottom here, you will see the web address that you can go to start to submit your data, which is also included in the AC appendix for airport operators.
Hey, John, I know our time spending together working NOTAM modernization, the PERM NOTAM has been a big challenge for us. So if there was one thing you could cite as important when considering issuing PERM NOTAM, could you provide that to us?
The first thing I would emphasize is if a change to published data is being considered or anticipated in advance, the publication process should be initiated to either meet the publication cycle when the changes will be in effect, or to limit the number of days the NOTAM is published prior to the publication cycle date. So that is the most important thing, is the publication of the information, because that is the baseline data for the airport itself. And baseline data is available into the electronic flight bags on the cycles, which is accessed in the cockpit. NOTAMs are not necessarily available right away to the cockpit. Thank you.
Okay, as John cited earlier, the Office of Airport published their advisory circular 150, 5228 Golf back in May. And within that advisory circular, we included a flow chart with 4 categories identified as tools to use when changing, amending attributes at an airport. So what you're looking at here is the illustration here across the top are the production tools in which the actual attribute for the airports are aligned underneath each category for publishing airport data. So if you utilize this particular graphics here, you shouldn't have any problem addressing PERM NOTAMs at your location should you desire to use those type of NOTAMs. So Greg, we're going to get into the NOTAM tools now. So could you kind of give us an overview, talk about both the retrieval tool and some of the production tools that within the NOTAM system?
Absolutely. Right now, what you see on the page, the current NOTAM retrieval system for the FAA is called FNS NOTAM Search. It's the FAA's public location single source NOTAM website that provides machine readable, searchable, archived, and filterable NOTAMs. Since domestic NOTAMs are the official NOTAM type for the FAA, the ICAO and plain language NOTAM types are not yet included for every single domestic NOTAM. But a prototype is available on the website as well. NOTAM modernization efforts will put the FAA on an ultimate plan to conform to ICAO NOTAM standards, which will improve the sorting and filtering of NOTAMs. You can also find letters to airmen on the FNS NOTAM Search website. If an airport has a letter to airmen, it is available when you search by airport location, and LTAs will populate alongside the airport's NOTAMs. Closure restriction notices, notice diagrams, automation, or CNDA are also available, but only at select airports as CNDAs continue to be established throughout the NAS. Training is necessary for any airport wanting a construction notice diagram automation and its program that the FAA is actively developing. And then from the FNS NOTAM Search homepage, one can access external links such as the FAA TFR website, domestic and international notices, previously referred to as the NTAP, and other locations. As some of you are already familiar with NOTAM Manager being a NOTAM entry tool that allows airports to process their own NOTAMs into the NAS, it also removes the need for airports to call their NOTAMs in through flight service. When submitting NOTAMs through NOTAM Manager, it helps to enforce NOTAM accuracy because NOTAM Manager rules are created in conjunction with FAA NOTAM policy. The use of NOTAM Manager also supports digital NOTAM availability. This is important because digital NOTAMs are designed to help reduce NOTAM clutter by allowing users the ability to sort and filter data. That is, digital NOTAMs increase machine interpretability of NOTAMs to improve graphical display, plain language, filtering, and so on. Freeform NOTAMs that do not fall into the digital scenarios that are built into NOTAM Manager are sent to flight service for review and approval in accordance with NOTAM policy, typically delaying the timeliness of receipt to end users. The eNOTAM 2 NOTAM entry system, very similar to NOTAM Manager that some of you use. That's another NOTAM entry tool that allows for airports to process their own NOTAMs into the NAS without a call to flight service. All NOTAMs created by airport operators using eNOTAM 2 are reviewed and approved by flight service specialists prior to activation. The majority of these NOTAMs are not digital, however. For airports with a low number of NOTAMs issued annually, eNOTAM 2 or a call to flight service may be a more feasible method for NOTAM processing. eNOTAM 2 is also the system that Leidos Flight Service uses to enter NOTAMs on behalf of NOTAM originators.
So Greg, like any other work center, there's airport operators out there that have a turnover of employees periodically. So are there any recurring meetings that keep those folks up to date on NOTAM system functionalities and even progress of this modernization initiative we're going through?
Yes, Bill, there are. So every month there is a airport NOTAM Manager Telcon, and it provides a forum for questions and answers on policy or system functionality. And it also provides updates on any progress being made with the NOTAM modernization initiative.
Yes, that's good news. And do you have an idea as to how those folks can get connected to that particular meeting?
I do. You would have to reach out to the folks in charge of the contract. It's the NIST contract, and I can provide links to those later on in the presentation. I can put them in the chat.
Yes, and I believe that information is also included in our advisory circle, in the airport's advisory circle. Let me bring in Matt, our air traffic control counterpart in this. Hey, Matt, for you, I know the tower controllers do get NOTAMs also and work with NOTAMs. So could you please share with us any air traffic controller perspective as it relates to perhaps the ATIS and NOTAM information in the control tower CAD?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the FAA's order that governs air traffic controllers, the 7110.65, or some may just call it the 0.65, we're required to maintain an ATIS message that reflects the most current arrival and departure information. And one of the reasons why we would change that outside of just being an hourly change is whenever there's a change to any pertinent data, and that could include a runway change, instrument approach and use, or a new or canceled NOTAM or PIREP that's in the system.
Oh, thank you for that, Matt. I appreciate that input. We always like to kind of hear from our air traffic control brethren to see what kind of impacts NOTAMs are having on them. Okay, we're going to switch gears here and talk a little bit about the takeoff and landing performance assessment, TAPA enhancements. Since the FAA rolled out TAPA in 2016, we've had continued to work to enhance changes as necessary. Recently, a new business rule was put into place that will not allow two separate field condition NOTAMs on the same runway. Also, other business rule will no longer allow a field condition NOTAMs on runway with an active closure NOTAM already issued. One of the other things as far as enhancement, we enhanced the pilot reported breaking action feature in NOTAM Manager, and it's been enhanced to gather more data, which will help us in providing archived data for any potential future updates to the runway condition assessment metrics. So we wanted to kind of build that in to kind of give us an opportunity to have a place to reach out to get data to kind of give us an idea as to how well that RCAM was working for the airport operators. And again, all this is for the effort to support NOTAM modernization to ensure NOTAMs are accurate, timely, and meets the needs of the end user. So Greg, could you kind of, that's just an overview. I'm going to ask Greg to kind of give us some details about those four particular items I just cited.
Sure thing. So the next illustration shows how TALPA enhancements will help reduce the number of NOTAMs as part of the NOTAM modernization effort. Policy no longer allows a FICON NOTAM on a runway with an active closure NOTAM. So for example, if you have the following active NOTAM in NOTAM Manager for runway 14 and 32 closed, You will not be able to issue a surface condition runway for runway 14 and 32. Talbot enhancements will also help reduce the number of NOTAMs by preventing the issuance of multiple FICON NOTAMs against the same runway surface, as Phil mentioned before. NOTAM manager users will no longer be able to submit multiple surface condition NOTAMs on the same runway or against the opposing direction of the same runway. So if you have the following NOTAM active in the system, runway 9, FICON 532 100% 4-inch dry snow, you're not going to be able to issue the NOTAM for the reciprocal runway.
Greg, let me interrupt you there for a second. Bring Matt back in. Hey, Matt, could you kind of please comment on the air traffic controller responsibility in accordance with 7110.65 for runway condition code NOTAM and the phraseology the tower would typically use?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're required again by the 0.65 and the ATIS broadcast to put in the runway condition codes if they're provided. And it's especially important to give the time of that report. So we would provide the report by saying, runway 14 condition codes and then the values based on the segment of the runway at whatever time, Zulu time that would be.
Excellent. Thank you.
So this is the NOTAM manager view of the pilot reported braking action update capabilities that Phil mentioned earlier. And here users will be able to fix a date, time of the information, and you can now add or edit pilot reported braking action info into previously issued FICON NOTAMs. And take note that the time factor for adding PIREP info into published FICON NOTAMs is 1 hour after the NOTAM's observation time.
So Matt, let me pick on Matt again here. So Matt, what actions or notification does tower take with the airport operator on pilot reported braking action?
Yeah, so we all want to work together in the system as best we can. So we're the first to really get a pilot reported braking action report, and we have certain criteria when we're supposed to ask for that as well. So our responsibility is to advise the airport operator that runway braking action reports are good to medium, medium, or medium to poor, or nil if it's been received by us.
Excellent. Thank you for that input. So Greg, I asked you to continue, please.
Sure thing. Let's talk specifics on airport FICON NOTAMs, which are the most commonly issued type of NOTAMs during the winter months. Field condition NOTAMs are a huge contributor to NOTAM volume, but this is to be expected as they can only be issued for 24 hours. And when there's a significant update to the ever-changing conditions, a new NOTAM usually is submitted to replace the previous FICON NOTAM. Unfortunately, we do see a large amount of errors with FICON NOTAMs. Majority of them are runway field condition NOTAMs. A few reminders about FICON NOTAMs. Runway FICON NOTAMs are used to report runway surface conditions. A braking action report on a runway from a landing aircraft should be processed as a pilot report, not a NOTAM. And taxiway and apron NOTAMs or FICON NOTAMs do not generate a runway condition code. Braking action report terminology are good to medium, medium, medium to poor, poor, or nil, with braking action NOTAMs used with keywords taxiway and apron only. Continuing with field condition NOTAMs, here are some reminders on reporting contaminant width. If the contaminant, that is snow, ice, slush, etc., is the full width of the surface, do not include a width of the NOTAM. Remember, we're talking about NOTAMs here. We're only advertising a change in published information or an abnormal condition. If the contaminant is not the full width of the surface, include the width of the contaminant, and you must add a remainder with the contaminant type and depth if necessary. Or if there are ridges, berms, snowbanks, windrows, drifts at the edge of the reported contaminant, add them. If ridges are reported, a remainder is not necessary. Reporting treatment width, surface treated to the full width, you're not going to include plowed or swept or a width. Partial treatment with a surface, you're going to include the width of the treatment and include the remainder with any contaminant type and depth if necessary. Add ridges at the end of reported contaminants as applicable, and if ridges are reported, a remainder is no longer necessary. Work in progress NOTAMs. The NOTAM policy and the associated advisory circulars cite specific criteria for work in progress NOTAMs, as well as any necessary information be included in the body of the NOTAM. Work in progress NOTAMs are used to describe any work being done on the airport surface, including activities such as construction, mowing, and ice removal. Snow and ice removal, rather. Work in progress does not close a movement area. For example, you submit a work in progress NOTAM for snow removal on a runway and will require users to have prior permission for full operational use of the runway. You would then issue a NOTAM closure, closing the runway with the necessary time frame for prior permission in order to access the surface. A work in progress reason is mandatory for describing construction and snow and ice removal NOTAMs. Other work in progress reasons are optional. And note that work in progress NOTAMs are only issued when the work is occurring. When issuing work in progress NOTAMs on or adjacent to a runway, taxiway, apron or ramp, or aerodrome, you must include the following: the appropriate keyword, runway, taxiway, apron, or aerodrome. Next, specify the name or designator of the surface on which the work is being conducted. Surface segment description must be specified in feet or from a specific point to point. An example would be taxiway alpha between taxiway echo and taxiway foxtrot. Work in progress, a reason, construction, snow and ice removal, whatever it may be, and then any remarks. Airport operators are expected to ensure snow and ice removal NOTAMs remain active only while actual snow and ice removal operations are taking place. A NOTAM for each runway impacted is issued as the work in progress moves from one runway surface to the next. For safety assurance and efficiency of snow and ice removal operations, the following conditions must be met before proceeding. For towered airports, the tower is in operation during the valid period of each NOTAM. For non-towered airports, ensure there are communications via secondary control center, CTAF, or other local communication. For uncontrolled airports, when a NOTAM originator submits a NOTAM to advertise the airport or runway condition that begins within 60 minutes of the current time, the activity must be reported to the air traffic control facility that has control jurisdiction.
Hey, Matt, I saw your brow raised there when Greg talked about non-towered and uncontrolled airports. So that kind of piqued a question that I think I want to throw out to you. So can you comment on the importance of notifying overlying facility, especially at an uncontrolled airport, in advance of starting prolonged activities such as snow and ice removal or prolonged maintenance on the runway, the importance of getting that information to the overlying air traffic control facility?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I just kind of echo what's been talked about earlier in some of the other panels. You know, time is everyone's friend here. So the quicker that the controllers, we know about the events that are going to take place that are going to impact operations to an airport or a runway, the quicker we can let the pilots know they're inbound real time, so they can have all the information they need to decide on whether or not they want to fly a certain approach or if they do need to divert to an alternate.
Great. Well, Greg, thank you for giving us some details about the takeoff and landing performance assessment enhancement. Again, those will really kick in as we approach the winter months, which is just around the corner for some of us and maybe upon others already in Alaska. But we really believe those TAP enhancements is going to do a lot for us, ensuring, again, the NOTAM is timely and gets to the end user in a way that they can clearly identify what's being talked about for us, the attribute being impacted. So we have just a couple of takeaway slides that we want to try to underpin what has been discussed, not just in this presentation, but it's going to reinforce some things that have been talked about earlier. The first one being is that it's a basic policy reminder that individual features such as spots, gates, and hard stands do not meet NOTAM criteria as a standalone attribute. These attributes can only be used as a geographical reference describing portions impacted. Both an acceptable and an unacceptable examples provided in the NOTAM order 7930.2 as well as our advisory circular. Also, should you encounter a situation where a tower closure contingency is implemented, we ask that you adhere to the guidance provided in Cert Alert 2107, and that Cert Alert was titled NOTAM Examples of Airport Operations, Aircraft Rescue and Firefighting, ARF, Frequency Monitoring during Air Traffic Control Contingency Operation. We ask you to kind of adhere to that Cert Alert because if you do that, you will ensure your NOTAM example will not be delayed for it's getting published in the NOTAM system. So again, just kind of reiterate what Matt just cited, keeping with the timeliness of getting NOTAMs to the end user. For uncontrolled airports, please ensure NOTAM information is coordinated with the overlying air traffic control facility when operation like snow removal, runway closures, and maintenance activity begin in less than 60 minutes. This was touched on in an earlier presentation, and again, we're just going to reinforce it here. And this one last slide, basically just keep a list of the employees at that the airport operator has of authorized folks that can issue NOTAMs. You need to keep that list up to date with the flight service air traffic manager, and that information is also cited in the NOTAM order as well as the advisory circular. During this NOTAM modernization issue, as well as other times, we ask that you please be responsive to inquiries from your regional representatives, the Office of Airports, us, the United States NOTAM Office, and Flight Service on NOTAM issues. Again, we are tackling the perm NOTAM challenge that we have head on, so there will be, at times, we will reach out to the airport operators and speak to them directly about perm NOTAMs as well as other NOTAMs on the airport, possibly. Continue to review your NOTAMs for accuracy, necessity, as if they are expected to be in the system for 90 days or longer. Please use a NOTAM perm NOTAM process that we talked about earlier. That flow chart we believe will be very helpful, as well as the language that we added to the AC. Probably 3 or 4 paragraphs that's in this AC that speaks directly to perm NOTAM that was not in the previous version. Again, it all goes back to NOTAM modernization, where we're trying to address that challenging issue for the FAA for its perm NOTAMs being in the system for prolonged periods of time. And before I lose my voice entirely here, just want to close with winter operations again. Perhaps again, like I said, it's already upon some, but around the corner for others. Please access the winter operation video that we saw coming back from a lunch break. That is a good product. We believe that is good for awareness, not just for the airport operators, but for your snow removal teams at the airport. And lastly, there is a YouTube video out there that speaks to snow removal around navigational system on the airport also. Those are already accessible to you. So please include those two in your awareness and training plan at the airport. So I will close with that before I completely lose my voice and turn it over to Bert.
Great, thank you, Phil. And thank you to our NOTAM modernization presenters and all of the presenters today as we discuss surface safety and operational concerns associated with vehicle drivers and other airport surface operators. I leave today's session with reconfirming the themes of strong communication, coordination, and partnership. We learn from each other, and this industry is second to none in consistently demonstrating this point. I want to thank all of you for spending the day with us, but most importantly, thank you for all you do in keeping our airports safe. At this time, I would like to turn the mic over to Frank McIntosh, who is the Vice President of Safety and Technical Training within the Air Traffic Organization, for some closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Burke. I really appreciate it, and given the opportunity to close us out for the day. It was a real pleasure for all of us to be with you for today's Surface Safety Symposium. These symposiums are a series of targeted discussions that focus on specific audiences and communities to improve surface safety. Today's discussion, as well as tomorrow's, are 100% dedicated to the vehicle drivers and other airport surface operators. I'd like to thank Shanita Griffin, the Associate Minister for Airports, for kicking off today's meeting with remarks on how we can all be proactive in surface safety and how imperative it is that we all work together as a team. Acting COO of the Air Traffic Organization, Tim Morrell, stressed the safety is job one, and that we all must meet our mark in excellence through continuous improvement, and that the information gathered today is geared to our specific audience. Tim looks forward in hearing the feedback generated from today's discussions as well as tomorrow's, and more importantly, the recommendations to help improve our metric in surface safety. We heard from Steve Devon from the Airport Safety and Standards Program about current mitigations, technology, designs, and planning concepts to minimize runway incursions. You also heard from Tom Mize and Giovanni DiPiero about surface trend information, specifically national trends on vehicle pedestrian deviations and how fiscal year 2022 appears to be trending higher from the same time period in 2021. But more importantly, Tom and Gio provided recommendations to turn that data into discussion items and actionable mitigations. This can be done through tenant outreach, improved security procedures, constant review of our training programs, and to actually share the runway incursion and surface incident data into a way to mitigate any identified safety issues to improve our safety record. I'd also like to thank the many panelists who took the time to join us today and share their incredible insights in the two separate panels that we saw this afternoon: operational safety on airports during construction and surface safety hotspot topics. Finally, we received an extremely important briefing on NOTA modernization and what's ahead. Fantastic information today, and I really look forward to tomorrow. In closing, I would like to personally thank everyone for their participation and for their engagement on how we all can improve surface safety through communication, education, and action plans. Safety is in our DNA as we collectively take ownership in our culture as we strive for excellence. Thank you all very, very much. And now I'd like to introduce Trish Hyatt.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Frank. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us today. We are so excited to have this time with you today, and it has been a wonderful day. Today's sessions featured excellent panel discussions on airport safety during construction and surface safety hot topics. During those sessions, I believe you heard a common theme: communication, communication, and say it with me, communication. I really want to foot stomp the message that it's important to coordinate with FAA, but also with each other. We are all in this industry together, and we become stronger and safer by sharing what we know. Knowledge is truly powerful in this arena. Also, today you heard the presentations on surface event trends and NOTAM modernization, as Frank just mentioned. I think we can all agree that having that type of information is always very timely and quite informative, and certainly necessary as we move forward with our data gathering to improve safety. For those of us in the world that experience 4 seasons, the fall season is truly upon us. And for some airports, that means it's time to plan for the upcoming winter season. It was great to review today the winter operations video as those airports that experience winter weather prepare for the upcoming season. Having spent time up in Maine, I certainly understand how important that is for all airport operators. And would you please join me as we give our speakers, presenters, and moderators a virtual round of applause. And while you're doing that, let's thank all of those who made this symposium possible today. Thank you to all of those who were behind the scenes in the planning and the execution of this event. Finally, I want to applaud and thank you, those who have attended today as a person who, in one way or another, helps to keep our airports, vehicle drivers, and surface operators as safe as possible. Thank you for joining us today, and please continue to stay safe out there. Have a great day. Goodbye.